I'm Nathan, 27, and I have exactly two Christmas stories, the one I grew up inside of, and the one I've been quietly rewriting since the day I realized you can choose where to set your table. Until this year, my family's version always starred my Aunt Linda. She has a voice that cuts through music and cheerful chaos like a sharp bell, and she narrates everything. How the potatoes should be mashed, how sweaters should fit, and, most of all, how I should feel about myself. If you've got a relative who mistakes control for love, you know her type. As kids, we learned her mood before we finished our coats, whether we'd get a tight smile and a "there he is," or a long, theatrical sigh followed by, "Oh good, you made it." The joke was that the sigh was our family wreath, reliable, evergreen, slightly depressing if you think about it too long. This year, my mother asked me to be kind, just for the night. She said it soft, rehearsed. I think she wanted Christmas Eve to feel intact, the way it did when Grandma was alive, and kept a hand on Linda's shoulder. Grandma had a way of making space open up around people. Even Linda lowered her voice when Grandma looked at her. After Grandma passed last spring, the air felt different in the house. Thinner, like the ceiling got higher but the warmth fell out. Everyone else looked for her in ornaments and recipes. I found her in legal folders and crisp clauses because she'd made me executor of her trust. It was a job I almost refused. The lawyer's office smelled like lemons and effort. The list of responsibilities pressed against my chest like a second spine. But I said yes because Grandma asked me months earlier on her porch, bare feet against the boards, night bugs thudding against the screen. She squeezed my hand and said, "You see people as they are and still look for what they could be. That's a trustee." That line kept me steady through the summer's storm of paperwork and whispered phone calls. It also taught me the difference between justice and victory. If you've been in a family where one person collects the narrative, you learn to author in margins. I grew up mastering small escapes, a second walk around the block, an offer to take out the trash that needed no taking out, visits to Grandma that always lasted one more cup of tea than I'd planned. Linda preferred my cousins, especially her son Tyler, not because they were better people, but because they mirrored back her vision of what successful, grateful children looked like. Tyler always had the newest thing, and he wore his good fortune like a badge. He earned it, she'd say. Some of us believe in excellence. When we were teenagers, she said that while taking a video of Tyler's pile of presents to send to her friends. The camera swung past me and the two books I'd asked for. She posted it anyway. Every holiday had its small humiliations. There was the year she made a speech about how respect is earned, and then called on us to list one thing we appreciated about her. I said she made good cranberry relish. She frowned because she wanted, "You're the backbone of the family." There was the Christmas I put together a slideshow of family photos, including some from the hospital when Grandma was getting weaker. She interrupted 10 seconds in, "No sad stuff tonight," and switched it to a loop of Tyler's college highlights. She laughed. We need to keep the energy up, and my mother laughed too, not because it was funny but because it was safer. Somewhere in my early 20s, I learned to stop offering things that mattered. Bring cookies. Bring extra chairs. Bring nothing fragile. When Grandma died, the fault lines widened. At the will reading, Linda sat in a bright coat like a warning light. She'd been certain, absolutely, cosmically certain, that Grandma's house would be hers outright. Instead, the trust outlined a slower, more careful plan. The house would stay in the family trust until we decided, together, what to do. Any sale or renovations would require consensus from the beneficiaries. There was also a clause that surprised everyone but me, a small discretionary fund to be used for community good in Grandma's name, controlled by the trustee. Me. Linda's face didn't fall so much as sharpen. She squeezed the arm of her chair, smiled at the lawyer, and said, "Well, I'm sure we'll do what's sensible," which in Linda speak means what I've already decided. On the sidewalk afterward, she leaned close, perfume bright and cold. "You're too young for this, Nathan. Don't make a mess of your grandmother's legacy." I nodded because nodding is a language in itself. All summer and fall, I met with the lawyer, walked through the house with an appraiser, and started the tiny fund in Grandma's name. New coats for the kindergarten at her church, a repaired swing at the park where she pushed me when I was small. I didn't post about it. I didn't send an email thread or our family group chat any pictures, because my intention was quiet and stubborn, like Grandma's was. The only person who knew the details was my mother, who listened and cried because it reminded her of her mom in ways that both hurt and healed. "Your aunt is going to hate not being in charge," she whispered once. "I know," I said, "but that's grief, too." Then December came. My mother called the week before Christmas Eve and asked, carefully, if I'd come to Linda's as usual. "Everyone's going," she added, "which is how our family invites you and warns you in one breath." I said yes. I'm not a martyr. I'm just tired of letting other people decide where the meaning of a holiday lives. I also had a plan, not for spectacle, but for dignity. It started with one unexpected thing. I booked the town's little historic venue, an old library turned community hall down the street, for a surprise Coco and Carol's event in Grandma's name on the same night, starting later. Free entry, music from the high school quartet, cookies from Mrs. Ramirez, who'd brought casseroles to my grandparents every time they got sick. The quiet fun paid for everything. I spoke to the venue manager a week in advance, and we made a contingency call script in case I needed it. "Just in case there's interference," I said, trying to find a word that didn't sound like an accusation. She raised an eyebrow like she'd seen 100 families in our exact shape before. "Understood. We'll be ready." Christmas Eve at Linda's looked exactly like it always does. A table that could have fed a small village, decorations that were slightly too perfect, magazine tidy instead of memory warm, and a playlist which allowed no slow songs. When I arrived, Linda's eyes did a quick calculation. She hugged me while looking over my shoulder at who might be behind me. "Nathan," she said, crisp as a new bill. "So good you could make it." The living room was loud and sugar bright. Cousins, aunts, the clink of glasses, the kind of laughter that turns into a crowd noise rather than a feeling. Tyler came in from the porch carrying a box of extra ornaments like he was moving treasure. "Look who decided to be festive," he grinned, tapping my shoulder. "You dress up for once." I looked down at my sweater. It was a normal sweater. He smirked. He still wears the grin of the kid who got away with everything and learned that meant he was important. I brought a single gift, wrapped in plain brown paper with a red ribbon. Inside was a small, framed photo of Grandma in the garden, hair pinned back, holding a ridiculous squash she once grew and laughed about all summer. I'd had the photo restored and printed from the original negative. Grandma looked so alive you almost expected her to blink. The frame had an inscription, her name, the years, and a line she said to me 100 times when I doubted myself. "Start small, but start." The gift was for my mother, the one person who always tried to meet me where I stood. I slid it gently under the tree. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I was trying to hold on to a person. Dinner was its usual parade. Linda pointed out who'd brought what, including all the dishes she made and a few she bought and passed off like she hadn't. She asked Tyler about work and nodded loudly when he answered, so the nods felt like applause. When I spoke, she found a way to call it interesting, which in Linda speak is a velvet-lined box with nothing inside. She asked me how playing money manager was going, as if I'd taken up juggling. I said it was going fine. She said, "No small disasters yet," and everyone laughed, because it costs nothing to laugh when the joke's not on you. The living room drifted toward the tree afterward. We have a tradition of going one by one, youngest to oldest, with Linda narrating like an auctioneer. Wrapping paper drifted onto laps. Thank yous were rehearsed. My mother sat next to me and squeezed my hand under a blanket. "I saw the ribbon," she whispered. "You always find the good red." I smiled without thinking. Linda was in her element. "Oh, that's from us, sweetheart," until my present surfaced. Tyler's girlfriend found it under a tinsel avalanche and held it up. "This one's pretty," she said. Linda took it smoothly. Her eyes flicked to the tag. She stared a half-second longer than usual, and I watched the shift, the way she put on the crown in her head. She cleared her throat and turned toward me. "You don't belong here. Give your gift to someone who deserves it," she said. She landed each word like a dart, sweet voice, poisonous point. Conversation paused in concentric circles. The cousins did that small laugh teenagers do when they're trying to figure out which direction to point their faces. Tyler's lips pressed into something that wanted to be a smile and an apology at the same time. My mother said my name softly. Linda reached for the present and, in one fluid motion, handed it to her son. "Tyler's worked so hard this year," she explained, like a teacher dividing stickers. "Let's not pretend otherwise. In a family like ours, the moment after the blow is where the weather changes." There's the gust of shock. Then everyone steadies themselves according to the script. Maybe someone will make a joke. Maybe someone will chide. Maybe someone will say, "Not now." I've been on the receiving end of those small storms for years, and the thing I learned is that not every response belongs on the stage. Some responses work better in hallways, driveways, quiet corners where consequences can hear themselves. So I stood up and gave my mother a look I hoped she understood. "I'm okay." She squeezed my wrist. I said, "I'm going to grab some air." Linda spread her hands as if she'd made a point about maturity. "Good idea," she chirped. "Come back when you're settled." Outside, the night held a clean cold. You could see your breath. The neighborhood looked like December in a snow globe. Porch lights, glitter along the roofline. A distant car, door thumping closed. I walked to my car and sat with my hands on the steering wheel like something might fly out of me if I didn't hold still. I thought about Grandma bending over the soil, patting it like a good dog. I thought about the will reading and Linda's jaw when she realized the house didn't simply hand itself over. I thought about my mother watching me on that couch, torn between loyalty and love. And I thought about the small party I'd quietly arranged down the street, where Mrs. Ramirez had laid out trays of cookies wrapped in plastic, and the quartet was tuning up in the old reading room under a wreath. The venue manager and I had agreed on a phrase for the cell phone call in case we needed to move it forward. "The library is open." I dialed. The manager answered on the first ring, as if she was standing by the phone. I gave her the phrase. Her voice didn't change, but I could hear a smile. "Understood," she said. "We'll open the doors in 10. I asked her to make one extra call, to a number I'd given her earlier, the only other person who knew the plan. She promised she would. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, but there was a steadiness in my face that surprised me. I know some people prefer fireworks when they picture revenge. Mine was simpler. Mine was a door opening where another had just been slammed. When I stepped back inside, the house felt warmer, louder. The present I'd wrapped sat on Tyler's lap, unopened, like a dare. Linda looked pleased with herself in a way that made the room subtly dimmer. She caught my eye and performed concern. "Are we centered?" she asked. I said yes. The cousins drifted back toward their phones. My mother looked at me with a question I answered with a small nod. And then the front door opened again, and my Aunt Marlene, my mother's older sister, who avoids conflict like it's a second job, walked in from the cold though she'd already been there. She had her coat on and her car keys in one hand. She said, in a voice I've only heard twice before, "They're starting down the street." "What's starting?" Linda asked, laughing a little, bracing for a joke that would keep her in control. Marlene didn't smile. "The thing for Mom," she said. "At the old library. They're lighting the tree in the courtyard and the kids are singing." Mrs. Ramirez called me because she said she didn't want the hot chocolate to go to waste. She did not look at me, and I felt that same mix of gratitude and sorrow I always feel around the truly kind. "I'm going," she added, like someone declaring the start of a march. She slipped her arms into her coat like a decision. Silence at a family gathering is strange. It doesn't look like quiet in the real world. It looks like 100 tiny calculations. It sounds like distant jingle bells from somewhere you can't place. Tyler looked at his mother. Linda made a face that said, "Stay," but the room had shifted by an inch, and you could feel the difference like when a plane dips. My cousin Zoe stood first. "Grandma loved the library," she said, voice small and stubborn. She picked up her coat. Then Aunt Teresa, who rarely contradicts Linda, stood, too. "I'll drive," she said, as if saying something less would mean more fighting later. The door opened and closed and opened again. It wasn't a rush. It was a series of polite exits. Shoes thumped softly on the mat. The music in the living room suddenly felt too loud for the number of people listening to it. Linda tried to scoop the air back toward herself. "No one is leaving," she announced, cheerfully tyrannical. "We have dessert. We have the exchange. This is our tradition." But tradition, I've learned, is what we do, not what we're told to do. My mother stood without looking at me. She pulled on her coat and buttoned it with hands that didn't shake. She has the kind of quiet courage you can only see from inside a family. "I'll be back," she said to Linda, and then, almost gently, "if there's anything to come back to." Linda laughed again, but fewer people mirrored it. I didn't gloat. I didn't point at the door and make a speech. I just stood and watched warmth reallocate itself. This was never about making Linda feel small. It was about making room for something bigger to breathe. A family is a lot like a house. You can live there with the windows painted shut and call it safe. Or you can open one and let the heat move where it's wanted. Tyler placed the brown paper present on the coffee table, untouched. He looked at it the way you look at things that have shifted meaning in your hands. "We'll open this when you're calmer," Linda told me, as if she hadn't rewritten the tag herself. She seemed almost giddy, buoyed by the challenge of regaining control. "No one is going anywhere," she repeated, louder now, like the volume might glue people to their seats. That's when the doorbell rang. It wasn't timid. It was the confident ding-dong of someone with authority over the next few minutes. Linda's head snapped toward the entryway as if the house had betrayed her. Tyler set the present down more carefully than I expected. In the hallway, a shape moved behind the frosted glass, and I recognized the outline before the knob turned. The venue manager's wool coat, the kind you wear when your job is both hospitality and decisions. She stepped inside when the door opened, cheeks pinked from the cold, a cap of snow on her scarf. "Hello," she said, warm but businesslike. "I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm from the community hall down the street. We're starting the event for Mrs. Hill." She paused, kind enough to let Grandma's name settle. "And quite a few people are already arriving. We wanted to make sure the family knew. We have cocoa waiting and room reserved." She looked around the room the way good managers do, not challenging, just inviting. "Everyone's welcome." The effect was immediate and gentle, like a whisper at the center of a crowd. A few more cousins stood. Two neighbors, who always drifted over to Linda's house on Christmas Eve because it felt safer than their own, murmured to each other and reached for their coats. My Uncle Greg, who rarely takes a stand unless it's about the proper way to carve ham, cleared his throat and said, "Your mother loved that old place, Lynn." He put on his hat like it mattered. Even Tyler's girlfriend, who'd never pushed back on anything in her life, slipped her hand into his and said, "I want to go hear the kids sing." Something flashed across Linda's face. Panic, maybe, thin and silver. She stood very straight. "This is ridiculous," she said. "We are in the middle of Christmas. This is our home." The manager nodded like she'd heard that 1,000 times and knew how to step around it. "Of course," she said. "And we'll be there for an hour, and then we'll clean up and lock up. We just didn't want you to miss the carols. There's a memory table if you'd like to bring anything." She glanced, almost imperceptibly, at the brown paper gift on the coffee table. No accusation, just possibility. I bent to pick up my coat. My hands were steady. My mother caught my eye across the room. She didn't know the details, but she knew enough to recognize a chair being pulled out for her and the people she loved. Linda opened her mouth to begin a new paragraph, the kind where she gathers people with a story they don't get a chance to revise. She took a breath. The manager waited, hands clasped, professional patience wrapped around her like another layer of wool. More feet shuffled toward the hall. The music from the Bluetooth speaker stuttered and then stopped, as if the house itself were listening for the next line. And then Linda turned toward me with a look I hadn't seen since I was 12 and refused to trade away the baseball card my grandfather gave me. It wasn't anger. It was offense braided with disbelief, like the world had tilted and I was responsible for gravity. She took one step closer, lowered her voice, and said, "What exactly do you think you're doing here, Nathan?" I opened my mouth to answer. The door behind the manager swung wider, letting in a bite of air and a scatter of voices from the street. Someone laughing, someone calling a name, the skirl of a violin warming up, and the room teetered on the edge between two versions of the same night. My reply was right there on my tongue, simple and careful, the truth scaled to the moment. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even move closer. I just said, "I'm doing what she would have done," and tilted my head toward the door like it was a path instead of a challenge. Linda's eyes narrowed like I'd offered a riddle instead of a sentence. For a second, I saw the room reflected in her pupils, the coats half on, my mother buttoning the last button with that stubborn care, the manager waiting in her wool and patience. Linda's hand tightened on the back of a chair. "No one is being manipulated out of my home on Christmas," she said, each word bright and hard. "Please stay. Everyone. We've planned a beautiful night." I thought about all the nights that were beautiful because we were told they were. I lifted the brown paper gift off the table and slid it into my coat pocket. It fit, just. Then I turned and walked toward the door without another sentence. It wasn't defiance. It was orientation, like choosing to face a window in a crowded room. Behind me, shoes scuffed and whispers folded into each other. I didn't look back until I reached the entryway. My mother had fallen in beside me. She squeezed my arm once and said, "Don't say anything yet." It wasn't a warning. It sounded like she knew I'd been saving words for too long, and she wanted them to land where they mattered. Outside, the air held the sharp sweetness of cold and cinnamon someone had spilled on a scarf. A little line had formed on the sidewalk. Aunt Marlene in front, Aunt Teresa beside her, Uncle Greg tugging at his hat, cousins nodding to each other the way people do at airports when they've agreed on a gate. We stepped off Linda's porch and down her walkway, the yard lights throwing soft gold onto the snow. Behind us, the door closed with a decisive click. I could almost feel Linda's relief at the sound. Seal the house, keep the narrative. But the street belonged to December now. A neighbor waved from her porch and called, "We're heading there too. Save us seats." The manager led us like an usher, never in front, always just near enough to make sure no one got lost. The old library's entry lanterns wore wreaths. Through the glass, you could see garlands looped along the railings and the glow of a dozen lamps. Someone had hung a banner over the check-in table, in loving memory of Florence Hill, Coco, and carols for the neighborhood. When I'd chosen the font last week, I'd cried in the dark over my laptop because fonts shouldn't hurt. Now, seeing it printed, I felt a steadiness lift in my chest like the inverse of panic. Mrs. Ramirez met us at the door with a tray of tiny marshmallows. "For floating," she said, "because details are how you show love when you don't have the right words." We saved some extra for the late arrivals. She winked at me in a way that said she knew exactly what kind of late this was. Inside, the quartet tuned in the corner, their cases half closed like sleeping animals. A group of kids in knit hats clustered near the memory table we'd set up under the big front window. I placed a guest book there, 2 pens, and a small sign. Share a story, big or small. Someone had already left a photo of Grandma at the church potluck balancing 3 plates in 2 hands, her eyes laughing. A neighbor wrote, "She taught me to make biscuits that didn't fight back." A man I barely recognized had written, "She never forgot my name when I moved here alone." Beneath the table sat a box labeled coats. "Take what you need." I'd worried there wouldn't be enough sizes. Now, looking at the stack, I was grateful for every tag I'd clipped and every sleeve I'd folded in my living room where the cat tried to help by sitting on the pile. People streamed in behind us. The sound rose, soft winter sounds, muffled by scarves and the way you love someone who isn't in the room anymore. My mother drifted to the memory table and laid her palm flat on the cloth, like checking if stories still kept heat. She picked up the guest book and smiled at a note. Aunt Teresa wiped her eyes with the corner of her sleeve and then, embarrassed, laughed about her mascara. I found the manager again and thanked her. "You did this," she said. "I'm just the person who unlocks the door." I handed her a folded note, final instructions for the donation jars in the back, the stipend for the quartet. She didn't unfold it, just tucked it into her pocket and said, "I'll make sure it all goes where you intend it." At first, I thought I had imagined it, the sound of footsteps that are more posture than footfall. But then Linda's silhouette filled the doorway behind the last group of neighbors. She didn't shake the snow from her boots. She didn't lower her voice for the quiet of the hall. She stepped inside like a high school principal late to an assembly, the kind who expects the room to adjust to her presence. Tyler was a step behind, shoulders stiff, eyes on the floor. When Linda saw the banner, her mouth pulled tight. She was dressed for hosting, a red scarf, a brooch shaped like a snowflake large enough to be a confession. "We're leaving in 10 minutes, she announced to no one and everyone. She stood near the door, not joining the room so much as hovering at it. I didn't go to her. I didn't bring her into the center. I took my mother's hand and walked to the front where the quartet's music stands leaned at a slight angle. The players nodded at me. We'd rehearsed the order of songs the day before. I turned to the room. The quiet that gathered wasn't the hush of fear. It was that gentle bend of attention rooms give when grief is the guest of honor. "Thank you for coming," I said, voice careful. "My name is Nathan. I'm Florence's grandson." Around the edges of the hall, heads nodded in that "I remember you from the garden party" way. She loved this place. She taught me to trace my finger along the spines of the books and pick the one that made my hand tingle. She said that was your mind saying, "Take me home." I kept it short. I told the story about how Grandma organized a neighborhood sing-along here during a blizzard when the power went out, and how she used the librarian's flashlight like a conductor's baton. I thanked the quartet for playing and Mrs. Ramirez for the cookies and the teenagers for their willingness to sing, even though it's a risky thing to open your mouth in front of adults and try to be sincere. I mentioned the coat box, the memory book, and the jars by the door for those who wanted to donate to the elementary school's winter fund. I did not say the word trust or executor or clause. This wasn't about documents. This was about a person whose absence had weight. While the quartet eased into, "O come, all ye faithful," I moved quietly to the memory table and placed my brown paper present in the center. The ribbon made a clean X on the paper. A candle in a jar flickered beside it, the wick drowning and then catching. My mother stood close enough that I could feel the warmth of her sleeve. "Should I open it?" she whispered. I nodded. She tugged at the end of the ribbon carefully the way she taught me when I was small, as if even paper deserves gentleness. The frame slid out, glass catching the lamplight. Grandma's garden face smiled out, ridiculous squash and all. The inscription glinted at the bottom. "Start small, but start." My mother touched the words. She didn't cry. She laughed. The little laugh she gives when something hurts and heals at the same time. She would have loved this, she said. She would have told that squash story twice. I felt Linda before I saw her. The air changed a degree behind my shoulder. She set her bag on the table as if claiming a space. "This is sweet," she said, drawing out the word. "But family time is inside, Nathan. You've made your point." She looked past me at my mother. "Come on, Emma. Everyone's waiting." My mother threaded the ribbon around her finger and didn't lift her eyes. "I'm here," she said simply. It wasn't a challenge. It was a sentence with all of its own feet. Linda tilted her chin toward the banner. "Using her name without consulting me is inappropriate," she said. She kept her voice light for the room, but the edges pressed. "As the senior member of the family, I think we should discuss how these things are handled." I almost smiled at the phrase handled, like grief were a folding chair you could stack and will into a closet. I swallowed once before I answered. "It's a community event," I said. "In her memory." I kept my voice quiet, not to hide, but to make anyone who wanted it lean closer. "There's nothing to manage." Tyler hovered behind his mother like a shadow that wanted to be its own shape. He looked at the guest book and then away and then back again. "Grandma liked the library," he muttered, defensively to no one, as if he needed it to count as an opinion. Linda touched his elbow, and he straightened. We could have stayed there, locked in a polite tug-of-war of phrases, if not for Aunt Marlene, who had discovered bravery as if from a lost drawer. She stepped to the memory table, lifted the guest book, and said to the little crowd around us, "Would anyone like to share a story?" She didn't look at Linda. She didn't look at me. She looked at a kid with a beanie pulled low. The boy cleared his throat and said, "She helped me with my reading every Tuesday when I had to stay late." He spoke directly into the mug of cocoa in his hands like it could hold his voice for him. "She didn't tell anyone I mixed up B and D." Laughter hummed in the room, small and true. The kid's mother squeezed his shoulder. "See?" Marlene beamed. "That's a Christmas story." The quartet slid into Silent Night. People sang soft. The hall gathered the sound and gave it back warmer. In the middle of the second verse, I noticed Linda looking not at me, but at the jar on the table with the little slot cut into the top. She was counting the folded bills with her eyes. Sometimes you don't realize what someone watches until you see what holds their attention. Her jaw set. When the song ended, she clapped twice and said, "All right, lovely," with the energy of someone deciding where to put a wall. "Before anyone gets too swept up," she continued, "I think it's important to remember that Florence's affairs are not a public matter. Nathan has been enthusiastic, but there are proper channels for memorials." She straightened the edge of the tablecloth by half an inch, a gesture so small and controlling it could only have been meant for me. "We will be hosting dessert at our home shortly. Let's wrap this up." There was a small stir, the kind you hear when a flock notices movement, not because they want to follow, but because they want to register the change. I realized then that I wasn't the only one who had prepared for this. The manager stepped forward with a man beside her, thin, coat collar up, carrying a leather folder. "I'm sorry to interrupt again," she said, "but Mr. Abrams just arrived." She gestured to the man. "He asked to speak to the family at the event when everyone was here. He said it would be brief." Linda's smile went rigid, the way ice goes shiny before it cracks. "We are not having legal conversations in a public hall," she said. This is extremely inappropriate. Mr. Abrams looked gently apologetic and also immovable, the way good lawyers look when they've already read the next 5 lines of the page. I promised Florence I would deliver a letter to her family on Christmas Eve, in a room that was not anyone's living room, he said. He didn't raise his voice, but the shape of his words carried. She was very specific. She asked that it be read where neighbors could hear if they wished. I felt my mouth go dry. I hadn't known about any letter. The trust I'd handled for months didn't mention Christmas Eve or public words. For a second, I thought maybe he had the wrong haul. But the way he looked at me, steady, kind, like he'd seen my grandmother write my name on an envelope, made my stomach tip. He opened the folder. Inside lay a thick envelope sealed with a tiny red sticker. In Grandma's loops and corners, the front read, "To my daughters, my grandchildren, and whoever shows up when cookies are free." Someone laughed, a sudden release of tension that made other people laugh too. Mr. Abrams held the envelope up so the light caught the red square. "If you prefer, we can wait," he offered, not to Linda but to the room. "I can read this at the end, after songs." From the corner of my eye, I saw Linda's fingers twitch toward the envelope like a flicker. "You will not," she said low. "This is a private matter." He nodded as if he'd expected that sentence and had already set down a place for it. "Florence anticipated that concern," he said gently. "She wrote this letter for both places, the table where people break bread and the hall where they pass coats to one another. She told me that if either place is full of people who loved her, both places have earned the right to hear." The quartet, not sure whether to play, let their bows hover above the strings. In the back, Mrs. Ramirez arrested her hand mid-sprinkle over a plate of cookies and held it there in attention like a cartoon character smelling pie. The kids in hats pressed closer, drawn by the possibility that a grown-up might read something dramatic out loud. My mother slid her palm into mine with a small squeeze I felt all the way up my arm. Linda's face went through microclimates: surprise, calculation, irritation, determination, then settled on the weather she wears most: certainty. "Absolutely not," she said. "If there is a letter, it should be read in our home with the family. That's how we do things." She put her hand flat on the envelope as if it were a runaway napkin. Mr. Abrams didn't tug. He just tilted his head and said, "May I ask you to remove your hand, Mrs. Collins?" His voice had the quiet of someone who knows which words carry weight. "The letter belongs to the people it names. In a different year, in a different December, that might have worked. The insistence on our home, the bright invitation reframed as an order. But people had already taken off their coats and put down their heavy feelings. You could feel the room deciding not with a cheer, but with a lean. Aunt Marlene said, Florence loved a good letter, like it was a vote. Uncle Greg, hand still on his hat, added, she read them at the table every year, which was true. The thankful letters at Thanksgiving, the Christmas card from the neighbor deployed overseas. The manager stepped back, letting the room keep its own momentum. I thought about stepping in. I thought about making a speech to grease the edges. Then I remembered the porch and the night bugs thudding the screen and my grandmother's hand over mine when she called me a trustee. Trust is a verb before it's a noun, she'd said once, after a Sunday sermon about action. Not everything needs a defender. Sometimes you just need a witness. "Nathan," Linda said, turning back to me like she could still get the scene to pivot if her words found the right hinge. "If you care about your grandmother's legacy, you will stop this. Bring everyone back to the house. We'll read whatever that is with just us. That's how it's done." Her voice was persuasive on its surface and panicked underneath, like a polished floor over ice. I opened my mouth, ready this time. I wasn't going to apologize or explain. I was going to say, her legacy includes the people you don't invite. I was going to say, you don't get to decide who belongs. I was going to say, start small, but start, and let the sentence stand like a little cornerstone. "Excuse me," came a voice from the doorway, breathless and bright. Everyone turned. Tyler's girlfriend had hustled back from the coat rack, cheeks flushed, phone in hand. "I think you should hear this first," she said, eyes darting between Linda and me and Mr. Abrams. She swallowed. "It's the video. From last spring. The one." Linda's head whipped toward her. "What video?" she asked too fast. Tyler's girlfriend looked at him for half a beat, some private conversation ricocheting between them, and then back at the rest of us. "The one of Grandma," she said, voice shaking but steadying itself mid-sentence. The one where she held up her phone. On the screen, paused at the first frame, was Grandma on the porch in her summer sweater, the one with the small embroidered flowers. The timestamp in the corner read May 18th, 8:07 p.m. I recognized the angle. Whoever filmed it had been sitting in the wicker chair opposite her. The video title was just a date. No description, no title like a headline. But below it, in the tiny preview of the first few seconds, was Grandma lifting a sealed red-stickered envelope that looked exactly like the one under Linda's hand. The room inhaled. Tyler closed his eyes for a second like he could change a detail of the past by focusing hard enough on the present. When he opened them, he looked at me, not his mother. He looked afraid and also, strangely, relieved, like he'd been holding a heavy box all year and someone had finally opened a door. "Play it," Aunt Marlene said, her voice picking up an authority she didn't know she had until tonight. The quartet lowered their bows all the way this time and leaned in like everyone else. Linda's hand flattened harder over the real envelope, as if proximity could erase evidence. "Absolutely not," she snapped. "This circus ends now. We are going home." She reached for Tyler's wrist, a gesture so practiced it could have been reflex. He didn't move. I took one step closer to the memory table, not to block or to anchor, just to be near the place where the two versions of the night were touching. Mr. Abrams glanced at me, then at the phone, then at Linda. He adjusted his glasses like the next minutes had been underlined in an email I hadn't read. "Play it," my mother said, almost apologetically, like she was asking for a song she knew the quartet already had cued. Tyler's girlfriend's thumb hovered over the triangle. The room held its breath in that particular way rooms do when something is about to be said that can't be unsaid. Linda's jaw worked, crafting a sentence that could build a wall fast enough to stop a moving car. And then, without looking at his mother, Tyler reached out and gently lifted her hand off the envelope. He didn't rip or push. He slid her fingers away like removing a leaf from a book. Linda stared at him, shocked at the new angle of gravity. He didn't meet her eyes. He looked at Mr. Abrams, then at me, then at the phone. "Play it," he said. The little triangle brightened. Grandma's voice filled the old hall, summer and rasp, and that low musical cadence she used when something mattered. "Nathan," she said to whoever was behind the camera, and then, "Linda," clear as the lantern light. The hall went so still you could hear marshmallows sinking in cocoa. That's exactly when the front doors swung wider and a winter gust curled in, carrying with it a crowd sound from outside and a figure obscured by the swirl. A familiar silhouette stepped over the threshold, stomping snow from boots, lifting a hat. And the screen in Tyler's girlfriend's hands flickered as if the past itself had taken a breath. Grandma's voice on the little screen had a rhythm that silenced everything else. It was both familiar and new, the way she always started important sentences with a pause, like she was making space for you to lean in. "Nathan," she said again, smiling toward whoever held the camera. "And Linda, since I know you'll listen in whether or not this is meant for you. Tonight, I'm making something official." She held up the same envelope that sat under Mr. Abrams's arm, sealed with the red sticker. "This letter, you'll have it later, but I want my words on film too, because people can argue with paper. They can't argue with the sound of your mother's voice." Linda's hand twitched in the air, as though she could snatch the video out of existence. But the phone kept playing. "I've lived a long time watching what happens when one person tries to hold all the strings," Grandma continued. "It strangles the joy out of people. Families need more than one voice, more than one place to sit at the table. So I've made choices to make sure no one," she glanced straight at the lens, and somehow it felt like straight at Linda, "can turn love into control." Murmurs rippled through the hall. The kids in knit hats stopped fidgeting. Even the quartet musicians held their bows midair, as if the music they had tuned for belonged to this voice instead. Grandma leaned forward in the video. "Linda, you love fiercely, but you confuse possession with care. You will not inherit this house. You will not inherit decision-making. You will inherit my recipes, my photo albums, and my hope that someday you learn that leadership is service. Nathan will manage the trust because he listens before he speaks. And to the rest of you," she waved her hand like she was blessing the whole room, "don't let holidays become cages. Open doors for one another." The screen flickered to black. The silence afterward felt like snow falling inside the hall. Linda's face was pale, her jaw tight enough to crack a tooth. "This is manipulative," she snapped. "You can't possibly think." But she stopped when she realized no one was nodding along. Not a cousin, not a neighbor, not even Tyler. He looked at the phone in his girlfriend's hands, then at me, then at the floor. "I knew about the video," he admitted quietly, guilt spilling through his voice. "She made me promise to keep it until tonight. I didn't know how to," he swallowed. "I didn't know how to go against you, Mom. I'm sorry." Linda's lips parted like she'd been slapped. For the first time in years, she had no quick retort, no cutting remark. She stood rooted, every inch of her control crumbling in a room that no longer obeyed her. Mr. Abrams unfolded the envelope with slow precision. "Florence asked me to read this once her family had gathered," he said. "Since her words have already begun, it seems right to finish them." He drew out the letter, pages lined with the same curling script I'd seen in every birthday card she ever wrote. He began to read. Instructions for the trust, reassurances about fairness, but also small, piercing truths. She named the people she wanted thanked, the values she hoped would last, and the exact phrase that made my mother cry into her sleeve. "Emma, you are my gentlest daughter. Don't let anyone convince you that kindness is weakness." When the letter ended, the room erupted in applause, not polite clapping, but the kind that comes when tension breaks and everyone decides together which side they're on. People rose to their feet. Some hugged, some laughed through tears. My mother leaned her head on my shoulder, whispering. She saw everything. Everything. Linda tried one last time. "This spectacle doesn't change tradition," she hissed. But her words fell flat, swallowed by the swell of carols as the quartet began again. This time the music didn't wait for permission. The room sang along, voices shaky at first, then stronger, a chorus of people reclaiming what belonged to all of us. Linda gathered her bag, stiff with outrage, and stormed toward the door. Tyler lingered, torn. Finally, he shook his head and stayed behind, slipping his hand back into his girlfriend's. "I'm done pretending," he said softly. Linda left alone, boots crunching down the frozen steps, her shadow shrinking against the snow. I didn't follow her. I didn't gloat. I stood in the glow of the hall, watching neighbors and relatives line up to sign the memory book, drop coins and bills into the jars, and share stories about Grandma that stitched warmth back into the cold December night. My little gift, the framed photo, sat on the table where everyone could see it. People pointed at the ridiculous squash in Grandma's arms and laughed, and in that laughter she was alive again. As the night wound down, I stepped outside. Snow had started to fall in steady flakes, softening the edges of the world. My mother joined me, her breath making little clouds in the air. She slipped her arm through mine. "You did it," she said. "You gave us back Christmas." "No," I answered, watching the hall glow behind us. "She did. I just opened the door." We stood there a while, the sound of carols spilling out into the winter street, until even the stars seemed to hum along. And for the first time in years, I felt like I truly belonged, not because someone allowed me to, but because no one could take it away again. I was 28 years old when my father told me to go sleep in the gutter. His exact words, "You're a worthless failure. Pack your junk and get out of my house. Go sleep in the damn gutter if you have to," weren't even the worst part. It was the way he said it. Calm, cold, like he wasn't talking to his own son, but some stranger who'd overstayed his welcome. "My name's Liam, and yeah, I'll admit, on paper, I didn't look like much. I didn't own a house. I didn't wear suits or show up to Thanksgiving with a Rolex and a girlfriend in tow. I didn't talk about my job, mostly because no one in my family ever asked. But if they had, I could have told them the truth. I ran a fully remote tech consultancy with over 30 contractors under me. My company had just hit $15.4 million in revenue that year, all from my laptop. But to my parents, I was just the lazy son who never got a real job. It's funny how families can build an image of you in their heads and refuse to let go of it, even when it's decades out of date. Growing up, I was the quiet one. My older brother Nathan was the golden child. Star athlete, big personality, straight A's, dad's favorite. I was more into computers, books, and making money online. My parents never really got it. When I was 17, I made $3,000 in a week flipping domain names and thought they'd be proud. Instead, Dad told me to stop playing on the internet and go mow the lawn. So I learned to keep things to myself. After college, I didn't get a job in the traditional sense. I freelanced, built connections, slowly scaled up until I had a team, clients on retainer, and recurring revenue. By 26, I was making more in a month than my parents made in a year. But I still lived simply. Hoodies, jeans, working from cafes. I didn't flaunt anything. I didn't feel the need. And that, apparently, was my biggest mistake. The blow-up happened on a gray Thursday in February. I had flown back home to visit after Mom had guilt-tripped me about never making time for family. Nathan had just bought a new BMW, and Dad was out front helping him buff the hood like it was a newborn baby. I said hey, offered to grab us all coffee, and Dad didn't even look at me. Just mumbled something about how nice it must be to have no responsibilities. That was the first sting. At dinner, it got worse. Nathan was holding court like usual, talking about some real estate deal he'd botched but spun into a learning experience. Everyone laughed like it was genius. I didn't say much, just listened. At one point, Nathan turned to me with a smirk and said, "Still doing that laptop thing, bro? Or did you finally give up and get a real job?" That was the second sting. And yeah, it hit hard. Mom chuckled. "You know, honey, we worry about you sometimes. You're almost 30. You've got nothing stable. No house, no wife. Nathan's already talking about kids. Because I don't parade everything I do doesn't mean I'm failing," I said quietly. "Oh, come on," Dad scoffed. "You're living in a fantasy world, Liam. You've been playing pretend entrepreneur for years. Meanwhile, your brother's building a real future." I set down my fork. "I've built something real, too." "Right," Nathan laughed. "The mysterious empire you never talk about. Because none of you care enough to ask." I snapped before I could stop myself. The room went silent. Mom's face tightened. Dad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. That old familiar sneer stretching across his face. The one he used when I came home with a B+ instead of an A. The same look that used to make me feel 10 inches tall. "You want us to ask about your little fantasy company? Fine. Let's talk. What exactly do you do, Liam?" "I run a tech consultancy. I build automation systems for mid-sized firms. I've got contracts with clients in the US, Canada, and Europe. I have a team." "Team?" Dad cut in. "What team?" "Developers, project managers. I'm the one who built the framework. I oversee the operations. Last quarter we cleared just over 3 million. That should have been the mic drop. But instead, they laughed. Dad actually laughed in my face. "You expect me to believe that? That you, sitting in your room all day, raking in millions? Get real. If that were true, you'd have a house. You'd buy your mother something nicer than that $20 candle you gave her for Christmas." Mom's face twisted in disappointment. "Is this why you never offer to help with anything, Liam? Because you think you're better than us now?" I blinked. "What? I see how you act," she said, folding her arms. "Always quiet, always judging. You probably think we're all losers because we don't have your online empire." "I never said that." "You didn't have to," Dad said. "You think you're too good for this family. Maybe it's time you stop mooching and go be successful somewhere else." "I paid for your mortgage 3 months ago," I said slowly. That got real quiet. "You're behind on payments." I called the bank and paid the balance. In full. Just so the house wouldn't get flagged again. "You what?" Dad growled. "You didn't even know?" I looked between them. The letters were piling up. I called the bank from my hotel room and wired the funds. "You went behind my back?" he roared. "You think you can just throw money around like you own the place? I didn't want you to lose the house. You know what? Get out. Right now? You want to act like the big shot? Go live like one. You're not welcome here anymore." I stared at him. "You're serious?" He stood up, veins bulging at his neck. "Get out. Go sleep in the gutter, hotshot." I felt my chest go hollow. But I didn't say anything. I just stood, walked to the guest room, packed my bag, and left. No dramatic goodbye. No parting shot. I just walked out the front door, got in my rental car, and drove off. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. Our Munich client had just signed the renewal. I forwarded her a thank you and kept driving. And that should have been the end of it. Except 3 weeks later, I got a call from someone I never expected. Their landlord. And that's when I knew the tables were about to turn. I didn't pick up the call from the landlord the first time. I was in the middle of a quarterly review call with my legal team, going over some updated terms for a long-term client. When I saw the missed call from a number back in my hometown, I assumed it was a spam call or a telemarketer. Then I saw the voicemail. A gruff, uncertain voice. Hi. This is Todd Granger, landlord for 2125 Whitman Street. I'm calling about a lease renewal situation. It's probably best we talk soon. It's kind of urgent. Thanks. Whitman Street. That was my parents' house. At first, I thought he had the wrong number. I had no formal connection to the house anymore. I hadn't lived there since I was 19. But then I remembered. I'd used my company's legal department to pay off the mortgage balance anonymously. The bank had been days away from triggering proceedings. I didn't want them to lose the house, especially not without knowing. Now it sounded like something else was going wrong. I called him back. Mr. Granger? I said, once he picked up. Yeah, is this Liam? Yes. You mentioned a lease. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Yeah, I know you're not listed as the tenant, but I was told you were the one handling payments. Not exactly, I said carefully. I helped clear their mortgage a few months ago, but I'm not a resident. Well, the thing is, he said, your dad hasn't paid rent in over 2 months. I blinked. Rent? I thought they owned the place. Granger made a low whistling noise. They don't own anything. This house was foreclosed and bought out back in September. Your parents are renting it month to month. I'm the property manager for the company that acquired it. Been lenient since winter, but I can't hold off much longer. That hit like a punch to the gut. They'd lied. All of them. The pride, the arrogance, the way they looked down on me for not owning a home. They'd been renting the whole time and not even paying on time. He continued. They kept promising that some money was coming from you, that you were covering it. But when nothing showed up, I figured I'd call you myself. I gripped the phone tighter. I haven't agreed to pay anything since December. If they told you otherwise, that's not on me. Granger paused. Got it. Well, I gave them one last notice. They're on final warning. If I don't get this month's rent by Friday, I'll be showing up with the eviction paperwork. I understand. Just wanted to give you a heads up. And then, just as I was about to thank him and hang up, he said something that made my blood run cold. Funny thing, though, I walked in last week to do a plumbing inspection. Place was packed. Looked like they were setting up for a party. Even saw your name written on a sign on the kitchen island. Some kind of celebration dinner. My mouth went dry. They said it was your birthday or something. Whole family was coming. You know anything about that? No, I said slowly. No, I didn't. He hung up, and I sat there staring at the wall for a long time. That was the beginning of the unraveling. I hadn't spoken to my parents in weeks. I told myself it was over. I'd drawn the line, walked away. But somehow, they were still trying to use me. Still planning parties in my name. Still dragging me into whatever mess they were hiding from the rest of the world. I checked the calendar. Sure enough, next Saturday was my birthday. Except no one had invited me to anything. 3 days later, I got a call from my cousin Emily. Hey, she said brightly. Just confirming. You're still coming to the birthday dinner, right? What birthday dinner? She laughed. Yours, dummy. Aunt Carol said they were doing something for you. You didn't know? No, I didn't. There was a long silence. Wait, you're not going? No one told me about it. I got the invite 2 weeks ago. Said it was a surprise dinner for Liam's 29th birthday. There's even a catering service coming. Catering? That didn't make sense. My parents weren't paying their rent. How were they affording catering? Then it clicked. They weren't paying for it. They were saying I was. That night, I called my younger cousin Danny, who lived just a few blocks from my parents. Hey, I said, do you know anything about the dinner they're planning this weekend? Yeah, it's supposed to be at your place, he said. My place. Your old house. Everyone's saying it's a surprise dinner thrown by you for the family. Aunt Carol said you wanted to make amends. I nearly dropped the phone. They were throwing a party, in my name, at a house they didn't own, with money they didn't have, and they were telling everyone I was the host. And I wasn't even invited. I should have walked away. I should have let it go. But something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about pride anymore. This was about control, deception, manipulation. They'd always painted me as the failure, the disappointment, the quiet one who never measured up. And now that I'd finally found peace, they were hijacking my name, reputation, and success to mask their own mess. That was the breaking point. I started digging. Over the next 48 hours, I went full operator mode. Pulled property records, tenant filings, spoke to the real estate firm that managed the house. The entire place had been auctioned off in late fall. My payment to the bank hadn't been used to restore the mortgage. It had only paid off lingering debt. The deed had transferred months ago. My parents were squatters with a rental agreement, and not even a valid one. They'd lied to everyone. But it didn't stop there. When I checked my business expense logs, I noticed something strange. 2 charges for a catering company called Lavender Grove Events. One from last year during our team retreat. Another from just last week. Except I hadn't hired them recently. I called them up. Lavender Grove, this is Tanya. Hi Tanya, this is Liam Mercer. I think there's been a charge to my company's account that I didn't authorize. Let me check. Oh yes, we have a booking for a Saturday dinner. Whitman Street. You were listed as the payer. Same card on file. What was the name on the order? She hesitated. Nathan Mercer. My brother. He had somehow accessed an old invoice or pulled my company card info. I had no idea how. Maybe Mom had found an old email, or maybe Nathan had snooped on my laptop when I visited for Christmas last year. But he'd booked a catered event under my company's name without permission. This wasn't just lying. This was fraud. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the same questions spinning in my mind. How far would they go? How long had they been doing this? And why didn't they care? My whole life, I tried to earn their respect. Tried to be the good son without showing off. I thought that if I was generous, kind, forgiving, they'd eventually see me. The real me. But now I realized they didn't want to see me succeed. They wanted to use me to appear successful. And that made them dangerous. The next day, I got a text from Nathan. Looking forward to seeing you this weekend. Little bro, hope you don't mind the party. Everyone's really excited, smiley face. I didn't respond. He texted again, this time with a photo. A picture of the dining room table at the old house, decked out with silverware, floral centerpieces, and a printed sign that read, "Welcome to Liam's family celebration, hosted by our favorite son." That was the last straw. I called Granger. "Mr. Granger," I said, my voice calm. "You mentioned that Friday was the last day to pay rent before eviction?" "Yep, that's the final deadline. I assume you'll be showing up in person?" "Like I said, would you mind if I came with you?" There was a pause. "Is that legal?" "It's your call," I said. "But let's just say I have a vested interest in how this plays out. And I think it's time they saw who they were actually dealing with." He chuckled softly. "Be my guest." I hung up. I still didn't know what I was going to do. Not exactly. But I knew one thing. The dinner was still happening. They were still pretending. Still smiling to the world while hiding the rot inside. And this time, I wouldn't walk away. This time, I was going to make sure they felt it. Not with anger. Not with screaming or threats. With silence. Precision. And a little paperwork. But that all comes later. Because first, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to stand in that house, on the day they planned to celebrate me without me, and watch the whole illusion come crumbling down. I needed to be there, when their landlord showed up with the final notice. And I was standing right behind him. There's something surreal about hitting rock bottom while technically sitting at the top. The week leading up to the birthday dinner crawled by in slow motion. Every day, I went through the motions, managing client calls, approving budgets, checking in with my team, but my mind was somewhere else. Somewhere back on Whitman Street, at that table I used to eat cereal at while Dad lectured me about getting real. Now, they were dressing it up to host a party in my name, without me. They wanted to wear my success like a borrowed suit, one they never believed I'd own. And worse, part of me still wanted to be invited. That realization hit me hard. For all the anger, all the betrayal, there was still a quiet, pathetic little voice in the back of my head whispering, maybe they'll call. Maybe they'll realize they were wrong. But the call never came. I spent that Friday night in a downtown hotel room 2 hours from home, staring at the ceiling and asking myself questions I didn't have the courage to answer. Why did I care so much? Why did their approval still feel like oxygen? At around 1 a.m., I finally got up, dragged my laptop to the tiny desk by the window, and opened a blank document. I didn't know what I was doing, really. I just started typing. It started with a single sentence. My name is Liam Mercer, and I am not a failure. I stared at it for a while. It felt stupid at first, like some affirmation you'd find in a self-help book. But then my fingers started moving again. I wrote about the first $200 I made online at age 15, helping a Canadian bookstore automate their inventory. I wrote about the nights I stayed up teaching myself Python while Nathan laughed in the other room with his friends. I wrote about the day I signed my first international client and cried alone in a Motel 6 because I had no one to tell. I wrote about the silence, about how every win felt smaller when there was no one to witness it. about how I spent years trying to succeed quietly, thinking that would earn me respect, that if I didn't rub it in anyone's face, they'd eventually see it on their own. But they didn't. They only saw what they wanted to see. By the time I stopped typing, the sun was coming up. I hit save, closed the laptop, and sat there in the golden morning light, hollowed out, but lighter. That was my first step back up. The next few days, I changed things. Not all at once, but enough to feel it. I started sharing more with my team. Let them see the human behind the business. During Monday's call, I told them I'd been dealing with some personal stuff. Nothing dramatic, just a little honesty. The result? I got flooded with messages afterward. People thanking me, opening up about their own families, their own baggage. I realized I wasn't alone in this weird in-between space, successful but unseen, accomplished but isolated. Then I got a message from Zoe. She was one of my earliest hires, a junior PM I'd promoted after just 3 months. We hadn't talked much one-on-one recently. Hey boss, just wanted to say, you've always been solid. But this week you feel real. I like this version of you. It made me smile. Later that evening, I decided to go back to my apartment, the one I'd barely touched since the blow-up. I had been staying in Airbnbs, hotels, floating around like a ghost. But something about that letter I wrote, something about acknowledging what had happened, made me want to reclaim my space. The place was dusty. My mail was overflowing. But it was mine. I opened the window, let the breeze in, and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, just listening to the city hum outside. I thought about everything I had, not just the company, the freedom, the ability to pick up and go anywhere, live anywhere, build anything. And somehow, that made me feel safe for the first time in months. The next morning, I made a list. Not a revenge list. Not yet. This one was for me. Finish registering the new Delaware entity. Move all personal logins off the shared family email. Why hadn't I done this sooner? Update all corporate cards with new 2FA. Book 3 weeks in Lisbon. Work remote. Reset. Write something personal. Every day? That last one was important. Writing had never been a thing I planned. It just happened. But that late-night letter to myself had sparked something. So I kept it going. Every night before bed, I wrote 1 page. Sometimes about work. Sometimes about my past. Sometimes just about what I ate that day. It helped. A lot. I was rebuilding. Not just my routines, but me. And then, just as I was beginning to breathe again, I got a call that pulled me right back in. It was Mrs. Delaney. She was my godmother, technically, but more like the only adult in my life who ever treated me like I had something to say. She used to sneak me cookies during Christmas dinners and call me the clever one when I showed her my little side projects. Liam, she said, sounding nervous. I hate to ask, but are you really throwing that party? I sighed. No, I'm not. I figured. Your father told me you were flying in with some big announcement, that you'd bought the house and were giving it to them as a gift. I blinked. What? That's what they told everyone. That you'd made it big in crypto or coding or something, and were coming home to show the family how successful you are. My jaw tightened. They're using my name to cover their lies. I know, sweetheart. And I'm so sorry. But you need to know, they've invited over 50 people. 50. They even invited Pastor Charles. From the old church. He thinks it's a big reconciliation dinner. I let that sink in. They were creating a spectacle. Not just for ego, but for redemption. They were rewriting history in real time. Turning me into the hero of a story I was never even told existed. They're lying to everyone, I said. Yes, she whispered. But I believe you. And I had to warn you. Because if you show up, they're going to use you. And if you don't show up, they'll spin it. Make you the villain. That made something inside me harden. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. This wasn't about proving myself. It wasn't even about revenge, yet. It was about truth. I ended the call, stood by the window, and watched the cars crawl by in the street below. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened a fresh notebook, and I wrote out everything I wanted to say to my father. Every insult. Every lie. Every time he looked at me and saw nothing. I wrote about the gutter. About the look in his eyes when he said those words. Go sleep in the gutter. I wrote until my hands hurt. And then I took a deep breath, closed the notebook, and made a decision. I was going to that dinner. Not as a guest. Not as a son. But as myself. Not to yell. Not to burn bridges. But to stand there, calm, undeniable, present, and let their illusions collapse under the weight of reality. I called Granger. We still good for Saturday? I asked. Yup. Eviction notice is printed. They've got no idea it's coming. Great. I'll be standing right behind you. He chuckled. You sure you want to be there for that? More than anything. That night, I booked a stylist to come by. Nothing too fancy, just a fitted blazer, clean look, polished but understated. I didn't need to show off. I just needed to walk in like the person I truly was. I called my assistant and cleared Monday's calendar. And I booked a photographer. Not for social media, for documentation. Because when the house of cards came down, I wanted a record. Not to post, not to gloat, but to remember. To remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I had been used, that I had been betrayed, and that I survived it anyway. That I rose, not in spite of the fall, but because of it. Now all that was left was to walk through the door and watch the story they built around my silence finally shatter. Saturday morning arrived colder than expected. There was something poetic about it. How the sky stayed overcast like it was holding its breath, the kind of gray that made everything look slightly off, like a dream you weren't sure was real. I stood by the window of my hotel suite, sipping a coffee I barely tasted, staring down at the city that had once felt like a cage and now felt like mine. I was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that only comes after you've already lived through the worst version of something in your head 100 times. This wasn't revenge out of rage. It wasn't a scream for validation. It was a necessary correction, a realignment of truth. And I was done letting other people tell my story, especially people who had gone out of their way to erase me from it. I checked the time, 10:14 a.m. 4 hours to go. The surprise dinner wasn't until 3, but the real event would start earlier, when the landlord showed up with the eviction notice. According to Granger, he'd timed it to hit around 1:30 p.m., just as the guests would be arriving. His tone on the phone had been neutral, but I could hear the undercurrent of curiosity. I think part of him thought I was going to back out, that I'd get cold feet and disappear. But this time I was all in. The last few days had been a whirlwind of careful, surgical preparation. I'd had my legal team draft an affidavit detailing the unauthorized use of my business credit card for the catering expenses. I wasn't pressing charges, not yet, but I wanted the documentation ready in case Nathan tried to twist the narrative or push back. The last thing I needed was them crying defamation. I also sent a cease and desist template, and signed, to my own email from our legal inbox, just in case I needed to show it to anyone. It looked formal, intimidating, real, because it was. Next, I called Lavender Grove Events again. I asked to confirm the cancellation of the booking. Tanya, the manager, was surprised. Are you sure? Your brother said. I never authorized the booking in the first place, I said. She hesitated. Do you want to file a complaint? No, I replied. I just want you to know. If they try to pass this off as a last-minute no-show, that's on them. Not me. She got quiet for a moment. Honestly, she said, you sound like the only sane one in that family. I smiled. You have no idea. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I called Emily, my cousin, the one who had texted me earlier about the dinner. She answered almost immediately. Liam, yeah, you free to talk. For you? Always. There was a short silence. Then she said, are you coming? Yes, but not for the party. I need a favor. Name it. And so I told her everything. The fake dinner, the eviction, the forged catering expense. The lies stacked so high they were practically casting a shadow over the whole neighborhood. By the time I finished, she was silent. Emily, they used you, she said, voice tight. I knew something felt wrong. But this is insane. Yeah. What do you want me to do? Nothing big, I said. Just observe. Be my eyes and ears once I'm inside. If people start asking questions, I want you to pay attention to how they spin the story. You want me to record? Only if it feels natural. I'm not trying to make a podcast. I just want witnesses. Someone besides me who sees the cracks. I'll be there, she said. And Liam. Yeah. They don't deserve you. I exhaled slowly. That's the point. By noon, I was dressed and ready. Tailored black slacks, crisp white button-up, dark gray blazer. Clean-shaven. Hair neat. Watch subtle but expensive, just enough to register if someone was paying attention. I didn't want to flex. I wanted to contrast. I wanted to walk into that house and look so undeniably put together that no lie could stick to me. At 12:40, I got into the car with Granger. He was a burly guy in his late 50s, thick glasses, gray beard, polo shirt with the management company's logo stitched above the chest pocket. He had the eviction notice folded in a manila envelope tucked into a clipboard, resting between us on the seat like some silent passenger. "You ready for this?" he asked as we pulled out of the parking lot. "Yeah." "No second thoughts?" "Not even one." He nodded. "You're calmer than I expected." "Anger makes you sloppy," I said. "This isn't revenge. It's a reality check." He chuckled. "Wish more people handled their problems this cleanly." I didn't respond. I was too busy watching the city melt away into suburbs. As we drove, my mind kept flicking back to random moments over the years. Dad pulling the belt from the drawer when I came home with a C+ in math. Nathan borrowing my old laptop and never giving it back. Mom telling me not to brag when I mentioned my business hitting 6 figures. The way they always made me feel like an outsider in my own life. By the time we turned onto Whitman Street, I was done reminiscing. This was a new chapter, and I was writing it on my terms. We parked just down the street, out of direct view of the house. It looked like something out of a Pinterest board. Streamers on the mailbox, balloons tied to the porch, folding tables and extra chairs lined up along the walkway, like they were expecting a wedding. A giant banner stretched above the front window. Liam's homecoming celebration. Family is forever. I almost laughed. The irony was suffocating. Granger checked his watch. "It's 1:28. You want to go in first or follow me?" "I'll follow." He stepped out of the car, clipboard in hand. I waited 10 seconds, then followed behind, sunglasses on, expression neutral. The front door was cracked open. Voices inside. Laughter. Clinking dishes. Granger knocked. Nathan opened the door. He was wearing a suit. Not a good one. Something shiny and ill-fitted, like he'd borrowed it for a job interview 10 years ago and never had it tailored. His fake smile flickered when he saw me. "Oh, you came," he said. I didn't respond. Granger held out the clipboard. "Mr. Mercer?" Nathan frowned. "Yeah. I'm here to serve you and Carol Mercer with a formal notice of eviction. Non-payment. You've exceeded your final grace period." The air shifted instantly. "What?" Nathan sputtered. "You're 2 months behind. I have here a signed notice from the management company. You'll have 7 days to vacate. After that, enforcement begins." My father appeared behind Nathan, mouth already open to speak. Then he saw me and froze. "Liam." I tilted my head slightly. "Dad, what's going on?" Granger handed him a second copy of the notice. "You were informed about this multiple times. Your son has no legal obligation here. You signed the lease. You defaulted. This is your responsibility." I thought. Dad turned to me, eyes wild. "You said you paid the mortgage." "I did. Once. Months ago. To help you. Before I found out you lost the house and lied about it." Mom appeared next. Makeup perfect. Smile brittle. Like she'd walked out of a catalog. "Liam," she said. "Come inside. Please, this is a misunderstanding." "No," I said. From the driveway, I saw guests arriving. Cousins, aunts, old neighbors. People I hadn't seen since high school. They looked confused, sensing tension. Emily walked up behind me, her phone already out in her hand. Not recording, just visible. Support. Nathan stepped forward. "You're ruining everything." I looked at him calmly. "You stole my credit card info and booked catering in my name. You told everyone I was hosting this party. You lied to 50 people to save face. You're overreacting." I took out the folded document from my inner pocket. "Here's an affidavit from my legal team. It details every unauthorized charge. I'm not filing anything yet. But if you speak one more lie using my name, I'll press charges." Mom looked like she'd been slapped. Dad's mouth opened again, but no words came out. I handed Granger the go-ahead signal. "Do your job," I said. And as he walked past them into the house to post the notice inside, I stepped back and stood by the sidewalk. Guests were whispering. Some were already filming. Others were turning away. The illusion was breaking. And I hadn't even said a word to the crowd. I didn't smile when the banner came down. I just stood there as Granger walked into the house like a man with nothing to prove, clipped the eviction notice to the wall above the fireplace, and calmly explained, loud enough for everyone to hear, that the tenants had until Friday to vacate the premises. There was no dramatic outburst, no shouting match, no one hurling plates or storming off crying. The silence did all the work for me. It crept into the corners of every room, curled around the decorations, and wrapped itself around every fake smile. Guests stood frozen, paper plates dangling from their fingers. Someone whispered, "Is this part of the party?" A woman in heels awkwardly stepped back toward the door. Two kids who were tossing a football in the backyard just stopped. The illusion, so carefully crafted by my parents and my brother, had cracked, and everyone could see it now. Nathan recovered first. He turned to the crowd with that oily grin he'd used since high school. Okay, he said, clapping his hands. "There's been a little misunderstanding. We were just having some fun. Liam's a bit dramatic sometimes, but hey, that's family, right?" I stepped forward then. Calm, measured, no anger, no sarcasm. "I didn't authorize this party," I said to the room. "I didn't invite anyone. I didn't order catering. I haven't lived here in nearly a decade." Every head turned to me. They used my name, I continued, to make it look like everything was fine, that I'd forgiven everything, that I'd come back as some prodigal son to shower them with gifts and attention. But the truth is, this isn't my house. It hasn't been for a long time. They lost it months ago, and they've been pretending otherwise ever since. There were gasps. A few people awkwardly glanced at each other. Pastor Charles, white-haired, kind-faced, took a slow step forward. "Son," he said gently, "is that true?" I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. Granger stepped back in, folded clipboard in hand. "It's true. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer were served multiple notices. Final warning expired this morning." Dad's face was turning purple. His fists clenched and unclenched at his sides. But he said nothing. Mom stepped toward me, eyes wide and glossy. "Please," she whispered. "We didn't know how to fix it. We just thought, if you saw how much everyone missed you, how proud we are now, maybe." "Proud?" I asked, voice soft. Her lips trembled. "We just wanted the family back together." "Then you shouldn't have thrown me out." I turned to Nathan. "And you shouldn't have committed credit card fraud." His face went pale. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer this week," I added. "I'm not pressing charges. Yet. But if I find even one more charge, one more lie, or if you tell anyone that I gifted this house to you, I'll escalate it." He didn't speak. And then, just to make things perfectly clear, I turned to the crowd again and pulled the envelope from my jacket pocket, the one containing the notarized statement I'd had prepared earlier that week. "I never intended to make this public," I said. "But my silence keeps getting twisted. So this is a formal declaration that I have no legal or financial ties to this house. I paid off one debt last year out of kindness. That kindness was exploited. From today forward, I will not be covering, endorsing, or associating with any claims made by the Mercer family. If you hear my name come up, know that it wasn't with my permission." The room was dead quiet. Emily stepped forward then, phone still in hand. "You all heard it," she said. "Let's stop pretending." Someone clapped. Just once. A sharp, uncomfortable sound. Then a few others joined, unsure but supportive. A few of the guests who hadn't already left slowly made their way out the door, murmuring apologies as they passed me. I didn't stop them. I didn't need their pity. I needed my freedom. Granger handed one last document to my father and turned to leave. "You've got until Friday. I suggest you start packing." As we walked toward the door, Dad finally spoke. "Liam," I paused. "You think this makes you a man? Embarrassing your family in front of everyone." I turned slowly, met his eyes, and said the one thing I'd been holding in since I was 15 years old. "No. What makes me a man is walking away from people who only show up when they need something." Then I walked out. Outside, the air felt lighter. Not because it was over, but because I was finally done. Emily caught up with me on the lawn. "That was incredible," she whispered. I gave her a faint smile. "Thanks for being there. You were always the strong one, you know," she said. "They just didn't see it." I nodded. "They saw it. That's why they tried to bury it." We hugged. Then she left, and I stood alone on the edge of the sidewalk, watching the last balloon snap free of the mailbox and drift into the sky. I didn't look back. The fallout came fast. By Monday, the catering company had filed a small claim against my brother for breach of contract. My legal team followed up with a formal letter outlining the unauthorized use of company funds. It wasn't jail time stuff, but it would stick with him for a while, and that was enough. A scar he couldn't hide behind jokes. My parents tried calling me, once. I didn't answer. Their voicemail was exactly what I expected: self-pity, guilt-tripping, a few barbed compliments wrapped in shame. I deleted it. I found out through Emily later that most of the guests didn't stay long after I left. A few family members tried defending my parents, but most just nodded quietly and moved on. The illusion was gone, and with it, the grip they'd had on the narrative. By Friday morning, a moving van sat in front of the house. Granger sent me a photo, no caption. Just mom and dad sitting on the porch steps, boxes stacked beside them. Nathan wasn't there. I didn't ask. I flew to Lisbon that night. My assistant had already booked the Airbnb, lined up a few remote meetings, and cleared my weekend. The apartment was small but beautiful. Sunlight poured through tall windows, and the streets below hummed with life. That night, I opened my journal and wrote something new. Freedom isn't just walking away. It's knowing they can't follow you. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Not victorious, not vindicated, just whole. Because I'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, the only way to fix a broken legacy is to leave it behind and let the silence speak louder than anything they ever said. My name's Marcus, I'm 33, single, and, apparently, the family wallet. Or at least that's what they've tried to turn me into. Growing up, I was always the quiet one. Not the golden child like my older sister Janine, and definitely not the chaotic baby like my younger brother Kyle. I was just there, reliable, invisible until someone needed a ride, a favor, or, nowadays, a payment. I never minded being low-key. I liked solving things on my own, building my life quietly, without expecting applause. But lately, it felt like the more I succeeded, the more entitled my family got. And it all came to a head on Janine's birthday. Now Janine is 35, married with 3 kids, and somehow still acts like a teenager who expects the world to revolve around her. Every year, her birthday gets more extravagant. Last year, it was a catered backyard party with a hired violinist. The year before that, a weekend Airbnb in the mountains that I accidentally got charged for. I should have seen the pattern. But this year, it was dinner at this absurdly overpriced seafood and steak place downtown. A place where the menu doesn't even list prices, just poetic descriptions like prime-aged tenderness kissed with truffle foam. Yeah, that kind of place. Janine texted me the invite 2 weeks before, all casual. Dinner at Veludo's for my birthday. Can't wait to see you, sparkling heart. No mention of who was paying. That was the first red flag. Still, I told myself, be a good brother. Show up. Keep it light. And I did. I even wore the blazer my ex gave me for job interviews. There were 12 of us total. Janine, her husband, their kids, my parents, Kyle and his girlfriend, an aunt and uncle, and me. As soon as I walked in, it felt off. Janine squealed like I'd just flown in from Paris, hugged me way too long, and said, "You finally made it." Like I was late. I was 10 minutes early. We were seated at a long table, and from the start, the menu was chaos. The kids ordered filet mignon, each, and nobody batted an eye. Janine got the lobster and scallops. Her husband ordered surf and turf with extra sides. Even my dad asked for a bottle of some wine I didn't recognize, but knew had a 3-digit price tag just by how the waiter's eyebrows rose when he said it. I ordered grilled chicken and water. I remember my sister smirking. Still counting calories, Marcus? I smiled politely and said nothing, already checking my phone under the table to see how much the ATM let me withdraw per day. Dinner was long. Laughter, old stories, lots of toast to family and to Janine's big day. My mom made a big show of gifting Janine a silver necklace, then whispering to me, "You'll give yours after the cake, right?" I blinked. "Gift?" I whispered back. She blinked back, confused. "The money. You always do." That was the second red flag, and at that point, I was staring straight into the fire. Then came dessert. 3 of them, all shared, plus 2 more bottles of wine. Then coffee. My dad leaned back in his chair, hands on his full belly, and looked around with a satisfied sigh. And that's when the bill came. The waiter placed the leather folder down gently, like it was holding sacred scripture. My dad barely glanced at it before sliding it straight in front of me. I waited for someone to say something. Janine just kept chatting with her husband about some new stroller she wanted. My mom sipped her coffee like nothing was wrong. Kyle was on his phone. "Marcus," my dad said, with that amused dad tone he always used when he knew he was asking too much, but figured he'd get away with it. "You don't have kids. It's the least you can do." I swear, for a full 5 seconds, I thought he was joking. I looked up and down the table, expecting someone, anyone, to laugh or say, "Come on, Dad, that's not fair." But nothing. Just silence and sips. Janine was fixing her lipstick in her phone camera. My mom was already pulling on her shawl, like the evening was done and I was supposed to settle the final page like a closing act. I flipped the folder open. $1,840. I don't know what it was exactly that snapped in me. Maybe it was the years of being the responsible one. You're so lucky you don't have to deal with daycare or dance recitals comments. Maybe it was the time I lent Kyle $2,000 for a used car he totaled in 3 weeks and never paid back. Or when my parents borrowed money for a leaky roof that miraculously never got fixed. Or when Janine called me just a guy who codes all day during Thanksgiving dinner in front of 20 people. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a 20, crisp, from the ATM earlier that day. Then you can split what's left, I said, placing it on top of the bill. I stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked out without looking back. It was like time paused behind me. I heard a sharp inhale, probably my mom. Maybe someone called my name, but I didn't turn. The air outside was cold and sharp, the way city air gets at night when the heat of the day vanishes all at once. I took a deep breath and started walking. I didn't even take my car. Just walked 2 blocks to a bar I liked, ordered a beer, and turned my phone off. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls, 20 from my mom alone. My voicemail was full. Family group chat was exploding, dozens of texts with everything from seriously to grow up, Marcus. My favorite was from Kyle. You embarrassed everyone last night. Mom was crying. I listened to the voicemail from my mom last. Her voice was sharp, controlled in that way where you could tell she was furious but didn't want it to sound like yelling. Marcus, I don't know what that was last night, but you've embarrassed us all. That was your sister's special night. She was humiliated. You made a scene. Call me back immediately. I didn't call. I didn't explain. I didn't even get mad. I just texted one word back. Good. And then I sat back, poured myself a coffee, and started thinking. Not about apologies. Not about regrets. About the next move. Because I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The silence that followed my one-word reply was almost disappointing. For a whole hour after I sent that text, good, I braced for impact. I thought there'd be another barrage. Maybe even a knock on my door. But the notifications stopped. The group chat fell dead quiet. No calls. No follow-ups. That's when I knew they weren't cooling off. They were regrouping. See, my family isn't the kind that yells right away. They wound you with guilt. Long, strategic silences. Then they come back with emotional haymakers. We raised you. We always supported you. This family has sacrificed so much for you. But they never talk about what I sacrificed. How I paid my own tuition by working night shifts at a warehouse. How I helped mom when she had her second surgery because Janine was too stressed with the kids. How I let them use my credit card to hold the deposit for Kyle's apartment, just for a few days, that turned into 6 months of collection notices. And how I never once threw it back in their faces. Until now. 2 days later, a letter arrived. A literal envelope. Mailed. That was mom's next move, bringing out the old-school emotional warfare. The handwriting on the front was hers. Neat and overly formal, like she was writing to a judge. I opened it, already rolling my eyes. Inside was a typed letter. 2 pages, single-spaced, signed at the bottom in pen like it was a ceasefire agreement. It started with, "Dear Marcus, we are deeply hurt." Not angry, not disappointed. Hurt. That was how they always framed it. Like I wasn't allowed to have boundaries because they were the ones feeling pain. It went on to say how unfortunate my outburst was, how humiliated Janine felt in front of the family, how the evening had been utterly ruined by my uncharacteristic behavior. Then came the part that really got me. We've always appreciated how generous you've been. That's why we assumed, in good faith, that covering the dinner wouldn't be an issue. Your father said it jokingly. You took it personally. Right. Because casually dropping a nearly $2,000 bill on me was all a joke. But the kicker? The last paragraph. Your absence at Sunday's family brunch would only widen the rift. We hope you'll do the mature thing and join us at 11 a.m. Janine has already forgiven you. Forgiven me. Like I was the one who needed forgiveness. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Something about it. How smug, how twisted it was, flipped a switch in me. For years, I'd swallowed this garbage with a smile. I let them pretend they were just teasing when they belittled me. Let them rewrite history every time I stepped in to clean up their mess, and they called it helping out. So no, I wasn't going to brunch. But I wasn't just going to stay silent, either. That night, I went into my online banking. I've been doing pretty well, software consulting, remote contracts, some crypto at the right time. I never brag about it. My family doesn't know how much I really have. Because if they did, the requests would never stop. Even without knowing the full picture, they'd already turned me into the family ATM. But now I started doing the math on just how much I'd already funded. I pulled up old Venmo receipts, PayPal logs, even text messages for IOUs they never honored. I added it all up. $6,830 for Kyle's car, insurance, and rent shortfalls. For $1,200 in temporary loans to my parents over the years. $1,000 for Janine's baby shower. $3,000 toward Dad's emergency dental work, which, spoiler alert, turned into a trip to Cancun with Mom. And countless dinners, events, Uber rides, and gifts from all of us that I alone paid for. I printed every transaction. I annotated them with notes. I turned the whole thing into a neatly stapled packet labeled, "Receipts, since you forgot." Then I did something I'd never done before. I sent it to the entire family group chat. No caption, no long message. Just one photo of the cover page and the words, "This is what I've already done. Consider it my final contribution." Cue the explosion. It started with Kyle, who sent "What is this?" followed by 10 angry face emojis. Then Janine, who said, "Wow, petty much." My mom followed with a string of increasingly guilt-laced messages. "You're weaponizing your kindness. That's not who you are, Marcus." I sat back, sipping coffee, watching it all unravel. Then came the call from my dad. I didn't answer. The voicemail started calm. "Marcus, son, we need to talk," and quickly dissolved into, "You think money makes you better than us? You wouldn't have anything without this family." Right. The family that never once showed up when I defended my thesis. The family that didn't even send a card when I bought my first home. The family that couldn't be bothered to learn what I actually do for work, but always knew how to ask me for money. That weekend, I got 6 calls from my aunt. 1 from my grandmother. Even a text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. "You good, bro?" By the time Sunday brunch rolled around, I was blocking numbers left and right. I spent the morning in sweatpants, watching a documentary and ordering pancakes just for myself. No forced smiles. No polite conversations. No pretending to laugh at Dad's recycled jokes or letting Janine insult me with a smile. But I wasn't done. Because the final card they didn't know I held, I was still paying for something big. Something they'd never connected to me because I kept it separate under a different account name. I paid the tuition for Kyle's last semester of college. The school had my information on file as the emergency contact, the financial backer. Why? Because our parents couldn't co-sign, and Kyle begged me for one last chance to get his life on track. He had no idea that his payment deadline was Monday, or that I still had time to pull the plug, and I was seriously considering it. Monday morning came like any other, except this time I wasn't sleepwalking through it. I woke up before my alarm, something I hadn't done in months. No dread, no tight chest, just clarity. My apartment was still dark except for the faint blue from the hallway lights spilling in, and for the first time in a long time, I felt still, peaceful even. I made myself coffee, not instant, the good kind, the kind I save for weekends or special occasions, because today was one. Today was the first day I'd act like I mattered, like I was done being the safety net for people who never once asked how I was doing. The tuition portal for Kyle's university was open. I logged in with the account I set up for him 2 years ago when I agreed to just co-sign and somehow became the sole payer. Tuition was due by 11:59 p.m. A lovely red banner at the top of the page flashed. Pending payment. $8,920. Fall semester. I hovered my mouse over the Pay Now button, then moved to Remove Authorized Payment Method. Click. Confirmed. There. Just like that, I was out. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't even feel angry. I felt awake. Present. Like I was finally stepping out from a shadow I hadn't realized I'd been living in for over a decade. At exactly 9:14 a.m., my phone rang. It was Kyle. I let it ring. Then again at 9:16. Then 9:19. By 9:25, I had 8 missed calls and a text that simply said, "Bro, please tell me you didn't cancel the tuition thing." I didn't answer. I watched the little dots appear, then disappear, then reappear. I just got off the phone with financial aid. They said the payment method is gone. WTF. Still didn't answer. I walked to my kitchen, poured more coffee, added cinnamon, something Janine once mocked me for, calling it bougie, and sat by the window. Outside, the city was moving on, cars honking, people rushing. But I wasn't rushing anymore. I was watching it like a man who finally realized he didn't have to fix everything for everyone else to keep breathing. At 9:41, I got another text. This one was longer. Look, I know I've been a fool sometimes, okay? But you can't just drop this on me the day it's due. I'll get kicked out. You promised you'd help. Don't mess me over like this. Ah, that tone. The you owe me tone. The same one he used when I refused to lend him money for a new gaming rig last Christmas, and he called me a buzzkill. The same tone Janine used when I said I wouldn't babysit her kids last minute because I had an interview. I didn't reply, but I screenshotted the texts. I had a feeling I might need to remind myself later of how quickly the people who need you turn bitter when you stop feeding the cycle. By noon, my mom called again. Voicemail. Marcus, you need to fix this. Your brother is panicking. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this isn't the time to prove a point. We are family, and family doesn't give up on each other. No mention of the birthday dinner. No mention of the $15,000 I'd covered across 3 years. Just a demand disguised as a plea. But the real blow came at 3:37 p.m. Janine. She hadn't texted me since the group chat explosion. Hadn't reached out personally. But now she sent a message that made my blood pressure spike and my jaw clench so hard I thought I might crack a molar. This is getting out of hand. Just pay the tuition and stop being dramatic. You're not the victim here. You chose to make yourself the bank. Don't act shocked now that people expect you to act like one. That was it. No hello. No apology. Just that. I stared at the message for a long time, rereading it like a bad novel where the villain doesn't even bother to hide behind a smile anymore. And for once, I let the anger come. Not to explode. Not to scream or argue, but to fuel something deeper. I opened my laptop again. Went to Google Drive. I had something else I'd been working on. A letter. One I started drafting a year ago when the resentment first began quietly bubbling. Back then, I never intended to send it. It was just journaling. Therapy. But now it was a manifesto. I polished it. Added a preface explaining the full breakdown of everything I'd paid for, supported, co-signed, or contributed to over the last decade. I included screenshots, receipts, emails. I titled it, Why I'm Done. And then I shared it. Not just in the family group chat, but with every single person who had ever taken part in my financial erosion. The aunt who asked for a quick $500 to cover rent. The cousin who always needed help with just gas money. The uncle who guilted me into investing in a bar he never opened. I sent it to all of them. Within minutes, the calls started again. But I didn't answer. I was already packing. Not because I was running away, but because I had booked a beach trip a week ago. A real one. Solo. 5 days, no laptop, no work, no family. Just ocean, books, and silence. And this time, I was going. I landed in Tulum just before sunset. The kind of sky that looks fake until you're standing under it. Streaks of pink and orange slicing through clouds like an oil painting left out in the rain. I rolled my carry-on behind me through a quiet little resort with wooden cabanas and no kids in sight. Just quiet. Just peace. Exactly what I needed. When I got to my room, I turned off my phone and left it in the drawer beside the bed. I wasn't ready for more voicemails, more manipulation. I'd spent so many years in fix-it mode, pouring energy, time, money into a family that saw me as useful but never seen. It was time to unplug, not to punish them, but to finally reconnect with myself. For the next 3 days, I did nothing but swim, sleep, read, and eat fish caught that morning. No emails. No messages. I watched the sun rise from a hammock, wrote a few thoughts in a notebook, took a yoga class with some strangers from Sweden, and forgot what time it was. But eventually, reality calls. I turned my phone back on the night before my flight home. It nearly buzzed itself off the nightstand. Dozens of messages, missed calls, voicemails that cut off because the inbox was full, screenshots in the group chat, angry ones, some desperate, some pathetic, even. I scrolled through them slowly, letting the venom roll off me like sunscreen in the heat. My dad's messages were almost predictable. You need to come talk to us like a man. You're acting like a child. No one asked you to pay for everything. Except they did. Repeatedly. Mom went from guilt-laced pleadings to sharp-edged blame. We don't know what's gotten into you. This isn't how we raised you. You're breaking your grandmother's heart. If your grandfather could see this. And Janine? She stayed true to form. You're being so extra about this. It was a dinner, Marcus. Grow up. You clearly need therapy. I told the kids you're just going through something. They said they hope you feel better. I laughed at that one. The same kids who I bought Christmas presents for every year while their parents bought themselves matching Apple Watches. Then came Kyle's texts. You messed me over, man. I had to go beg Dad for help. They won't pay it. Now I'm locked out of the portal. Thanks. You're just jealous I have something going for me. That last one made me snort out loud. Jealous? Of Kyle? The guy who'd bounced between 3 majors, 2 part-time jobs, and somehow managed to have a new excuse every semester for why he was almost done. The same brother who once asked if software engineers just fix printers and stuff. Yeah, I was burning with envy, clearly. Then I saw the message that finally pushed me from peace into something colder. Sharper. It wasn't from Mom, Dad, Janine, or Kyle. It was from Janine's husband. A single text. Since you want to air dirty laundry, let's talk about what really happened with the house your parents gave you money for. And just like that, it all clicked. This wasn't just bruised pride. This was retaliation. They weren't mad that I drew a boundary. They were scared I might keep doing it. That I might actually walk away and not come crawling back. They were already trying to smear me. Rewrite the story. Turn it from Marcus finally stood up for himself into Marcus is unstable and vindictive. So I did something I'd never done before. I hit record. The next morning, while I waited for my flight, I filmed a video. Just me, speaking calmly, sitting on the little balcony of my resort. I explained everything. Not emotionally. Not angrily. Just facts. What I'd paid. What I'd been asked to do. The dinner. The bill. The fallout. And then I said the words I never thought I'd say out loud. I'm stepping back from my family. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I'm done funding guilt trips disguised as love. I'm done being manipulated. If you've ever felt like your only value in a relationship was what you could give, not who you are, this is your reminder that you don't have to keep paying to stay included. Sometimes the cost of being accepted is losing yourself. And I'm not willing to pay that anymore. I didn't post it publicly. I wasn't trying to go viral. But I sent it to every single member of my family. Then I boarded my flight home. When I landed, the silence was deafening. Not a single response. Not for hours. But then, around midnight, a text came in. From an unknown number. I watched your video. I don't blame you. For what it's worth. I think you were right. Aunt Rachel. Aunt Rachel. The only one who never asked for anything. The only one who once slipped me a $50 bill when I graduated, whispered, "Don't tell your mom I gave you this," and hugged me like I mattered. She'd always stayed on the fringe of the drama. Never fully in, never fully out. Just there, quietly observing. Her message meant more than I expected. But it wasn't the last. The next day, I got a message from my cousin Amanda. Then one from my uncle's second wife. Then another, and another. Not a flood. Not a tidal wave. But a steady trickle of people who had quietly felt the same for years and never said a word. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd been used. I was just the first one to say no. As for the core 4, Mom, Dad, Janine, and Kyle, they fell into radio silence after that. At least publicly. I heard, through whispers, that Kyle was trying to pick up extra shifts. That Janine was furious-eyed, embarrassed the family. That Dad told everyone I'd had a midlife identity crisis, and Mom still referred to the dinner as the betrayal. But I didn't reach out. I didn't apologize. I just moved on. I hired a therapist. Started journaling for real. Made some new friends outside of work. Took an online course in photography just because it made me happy. And one day, a few months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a card. On the front, a picture of a steak and lobster. Inside, in scratchy handwriting. Hope this covers my part. Janine. Taped to the card? A $20 bill. I laughed so hard I cried. Not because it was funny, but because it was over. She knew. She understood what that $20 meant. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. She finally saw it. Saw me. And that was enough. I framed the bill. Hung it above my desk. A little reminder. Never again pay to be part of something that costs you your peace. Because family isn't who you're born to. It's who treats you like you matter. And for the first time in my life, I do. So, let me take you back to last Thanksgiving. My name's Sam. I'm 28, and for the past few years, I've been doing the whole family Thanksgiving thing out of duty. You know, the kind where you show up, smile through the awkward conversations, and pretend like everything's fine when in reality, you're just counting the minutes until you can escape. My family's always been complicated, but this year was different. It all started months before Thanksgiving when I realized something. I was carrying my entire family financially. My mom, my older brother James, and even my Aunt Linda. They'd been draining me for years, asking for loans, emergency cash, gifts, and I'd been more than happy to help. At least, I used to be. But after the last few months of being constantly asked for more, I started to feel the weight of it. My job pays decently, but it's not like I'm rolling in money, and I had my own bills to pay. Yet, every time one of them asked for money, I felt guilty if I said no. "Oh, Sam, I don't know what I'd do without you," my mom would say, her voice full of drama as she called me for the third time in a week to borrow a couple $100s. I'd always give in, feeling bad that I had so much and they had so little. But what really stung was how entitled they'd become over time. My mom never thanked me for any of it, never once. It was always, "I need this, I need that," but never, "Thank you for helping. I don't know what I'd do without you." And don't get me started on James. He's 35, still living with mom, and could barely hold a job for more than a few months. Every time I asked him what his plans were, he'd give me some vague answer about working on himself, but deep down, I knew he wasn't really doing anything to change. All he did was sit around and wait for handouts. Then there was Aunt Linda, who made it a habit to borrow money and never return it. "Sam, can you help me with my rent this month?" "Just this once. I promise it'll be the last time," she'd say. Spoiler alert, it wasn't the last time. I reached my breaking point one night when I got home from work and saw a text from my mom. It was a long one, like one of those texts that's way too long for something that should have been simple. She needed a small loan to cover her bills again. I didn't even want to read the rest of it, because I knew it'd be the same as every other request. But I did. "The kicker?" she said, "If you can't help me, I'll be in a really bad spot. You know how much I depend on you." That last sentence? It hit me like a ton of bricks. She was making me feel responsible for her financial well-being. I was her lifeline. And here I was, barely able to keep my own head above water. I had a moment of clarity that night, sitting in my living room, staring at my phone. I realized that I was letting myself be used. I was the ATM for my family, and they never seemed to care about what I needed. They just expected me to be there, pouring out my time and energy for them without a second thought about my own struggles. So, I made a decision. A hard one. I was done. Done being their financial safety net. Done being the one they relied on for everything. And done being guilt-tripped into helping them when it drained me. I didn't tell anyone right away. I didn't want a big confrontation. I thought maybe I could just pull back and stop answering their calls and texts as often. But of course, that didn't work. They kept reaching out, more insistent than ever, and I kept saying no. First, it was a simple, "Sorry, I can't help right now." Then it escalated to, "I'm not able to lend you money anymore." And finally, I stopped responding altogether. That's when my mom called me. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and she was in full-on panic mode. "Sam, what's going on? Why aren't you answering my calls?" "I really need you," she said, sounding almost desperate. But I didn't care anymore. I calmly told her that I wasn't in a position to help anymore and that they needed to figure things out on their own. Her response was not what I expected. "You're no longer welcome here," she said, her voice cold. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? I can't believe you're abandoning your own family like this." Those words cut deep. My own mother, saying I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving? After everything I'd done for her and the family? It was like a slap in the face. But I didn't let her see how much it hurt. Instead, I told her I was done. And I hung up. The next day, I didn't go to Thanksgiving dinner. I stayed home, alone, nursing a glass of a drink and scrolling through social media, watching as my family posted their usual pictures of the Thanksgiving feast. My mom, aunt, and brother all together, happy as can be, without me. I felt a mix of emotions. Anger, betrayal, a little sadness, sure, but mostly relief. It felt like a weight had been lifted. But the drama didn't end there. 2 weeks later, I got a text from James. "Hey man, I'm really sorry about what happened. Mom's been freaking out, and I think she just didn't understand. Can you help us out again? Just for the holidays." I didn't even respond. It was the same thing over and over again. They expected me to give, and when I stopped, they couldn't handle it. But that wasn't the end of it. Oh no, it got worse. Aunt Linda reached out next. Sam, I don't know what's going on with you, but you've got to come to Thanksgiving next year. Mom's devastated. We all are. Please just come back. Your family. They were begging. And the worst part? I knew they didn't really care about me. They cared about the money I could give them. They wanted me to come back, to be the same old Sam, who just handed out cash every time they asked. A week passed, and I kept to my decision. I didn't answer any calls, didn't reply to any messages. My family had pushed me too far, and now I was pulling away. It wasn't easy. I had moments where I second-guessed myself, wondering if I'd gone too far, if I'd made a mistake. After all, they were still my family. But every time I remembered how they had used me without a second thought, the doubt faded. I'd been more than generous with them for years, and it was clear that they didn't value me. They just valued what I could give. I spent Christmas alone. It was strange, but also peaceful. I cooked myself a nice dinner, curled up with a good book, and watched a few movies. No drama, no requests for money. Just me, finally feeling like I could breathe again. I didn't need to be there, playing the role of the financial savior anymore. For once, I was just Sam, and that was enough. But then, just as I thought the storm had passed, the messages started rolling in. At first, it was a few passive-aggressive texts from my mom, the kind where she pretended she wasn't angry but clearly was. "It's really sad you're missing out on the holidays," one text said. "Your Aunt Linda and James said they miss you. Maybe it's time to reconsider." That text was followed by another. "I'm just worried about you, Sam. This isn't like you." I didn't respond, but the guilt still lingered. I could feel myself starting to weaken. Maybe I was being too harsh. After all, they were my family, and the holidays were supposed to be about togetherness, right? Then came the phone call. It was New Year's Eve, and I was making myself a nice dinner, trying to enjoy the last night of the year. My phone rang, and I saw it was from my mom. I hesitated for a moment before answering, my heart pounding in my chest. "Sam," my mom's voice was strained, almost pleading. "I've been thinking. I know I said things I shouldn't have, and I've been really upset. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. We all miss you. It's been hard without you. Please, can we talk? Maybe you can come over and we can fix things." It felt like a punch to the gut. After everything, she was still pulling the "we miss you" card. I could tell she wasn't really sorry for how she treated me. She was sorry because I wasn't there to pay her bills anymore. But I had to admit, a part of me still wanted to believe she cared. So, I listened. "Sam, it's been hard on all of us. We all need you, especially James. He's having a really tough time. He doesn't know how to manage things, and without you, we're lost." I was quiet for a long time, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I wasn't sure if I could trust her. It was the same old pattern. They needed me, but only when they had a problem. When things were going well for them, I was invisible. Finally, I spoke up, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can't keep treating me like this, Mom. I'm not your ATM. I've given you everything I have, and it's never enough. I'm not the one who's messed up here. You are. You've been using me for years, and I'm done. I've made my decision." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing heavily, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. Instead, she said, in the most venomous tone I'd ever heard from her, "Fine. You can stay away then. Don't come crawling back when you realize that family is all you've got. You'll regret this, Sam." Her words stung, but I felt something shift in me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm. It was the first time I'd ever stood up for myself like that, and it felt good. I hung up without another word. The next few weeks were a blur. James didn't reach out anymore. I didn't expect him to. He wasn't really capable of understanding that I was tired of being the one to fix everything for him. Aunt Linda sent a few more passive-aggressive texts, but I ignored them. I stayed firm in my decision. But then, things took an unexpected turn. One morning, I was at work when I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering, but something told me it was important. I picked up. "Sam." The voice on the other end was shaky, and I immediately recognized it as my mom's. "Sam, please. I need your help." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. "Help?" I repeated, incredulous. "After everything? You've got the nerve to call me for help?" There was silence on the other end of the line. My mom's voice wavered when she spoke again. "I know I've asked too much. I've been wrong. But Sam, I've got no one else. Please." I could hear the desperation in her voice, but I wasn't ready to fall for it again. She'd played this game for so long that I could see right through it. But I also knew that I was at a crossroads. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I had to decide if I was going to give in to the guilt that had haunted me for years or if I was finally going to show them that I was done. Done being the family bank. Done being the one they could always count on to bail them out. I sat in silence for a long moment, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Finally, I spoke. "No, Mom. I'm done." I could hear her gasp in disbelief, but I continued. "I'm sorry you're in this situation, but this is not my problem anymore. You need to figure this out without me." I hung up, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of peace. My family had pushed me to the edge, but I had finally taken control, and I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. I knew the fallout from this would be messy. I knew they would be angry, maybe even hate me for it. But for once, I wasn't afraid of their reaction. I wasn't afraid of the guilt. I was finally free. The days that followed were oddly quiet. No calls, no texts. It felt like my family had finally given up, or at least that's what I told myself. I went on with my life, trying to put the whole thing behind me. For once, I was living for me and not for the expectations that had always been forced onto me. I focused more on work, took up some hobbies I'd been putting off, and started hanging out with friends I hadn't seen in ages. But the silence wasn't meant to last. A week later, as I was leaving work, I got another call. This time, it wasn't from my mom, but from an unfamiliar number. I answered it reluctantly, feeling a strange pit in my stomach. "Hello, Sam," a deep voice said, and immediately I recognized it. It was James, my half-brother. I hadn't heard from him in months, so his sudden call felt like a punch to the gut. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need your help." I couldn't believe it. I wasn't even angry at first. I just felt a deep, exhausted kind of sadness. James had always been like this, unable to handle life's responsibilities, constantly looking for someone to bail him out. I had spent years giving him that help, but it had drained me in ways I wasn't even sure how to explain. So, hearing from him now, after everything, was the last thing I expected. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. My instinct was to just hang up, but a part of me wanted to hear him out. Maybe, just maybe, he'd changed. Maybe he'd finally figured out how to take responsibility for his own life. I messed up," he said, his voice hesitant. "Big time. I don't know who else to turn to. Mom isn't helping. She's too angry at me, and now I've got these bills piling up, and my rent is overdue. I don't know what to do." I could hear the desperation in his voice, and I almost felt a twinge of pity for him. But then it hit me. He was doing exactly what he always did, trying to make me feel bad enough to give in, to rescue him from the consequences of his own actions. The same pattern I had fallen for over and over again. "You know what, James?" I said, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. "I'm really sorry you're in this situation. I truly am. But I can't keep doing this for you." I heard him sigh on the other end of the line. "Sam, please. I don't know what else to do. I've been there for you. I've given you so much, and you just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. I can't keep bailing you out." There was a long silence, and I could feel the tension growing. Then, in a voice that was almost broken, James said, "So that's it? You're really done?" I didn't answer right away. I was torn. The old part of me wanted to tell him everything would be fine, that I would help him like I always had. But the new part of me, the part that was tired of being used, was firm. I had to stick to my decision. "Yeah, James, I'm done," I said softly but firmly. "I can't keep doing this for you. You have to figure it out on your own. You're an adult now." I could hear him trying to hold it together, but I knew I had struck a nerve. "Fine," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I guess I'll figure it out." I hung up before I could second-guess myself. And for a moment, it felt like I'd done the right thing. But then, not 10 minutes later, I got a message. It was from my mom. The text read, "You've hurt James more than you know. This is on you now. You'll regret this." I stared at it for a while, my emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to reply, to tell her how much she had hurt me, how much she had taken from me. But I didn't. I had already made up my mind. It didn't matter how much they tried to guilt-trip me, manipulate me, or shame me into helping. This was my life now, and I wasn't going to let them control it anymore. The next day, I woke up to find several missed calls from both my mom and James. A few messages too. I didn't check them. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what they'd say. Guilt. Regret. Pleas for help. I couldn't help but feel a small twinge of anger. How could they still think I was the one in the wrong here? I'd given them everything. I had sacrificed my time, my energy, my resources to help them, and yet they couldn't even understand why I was walking away. But that was their problem now, not mine. The next week, I received a package in the mail. It wasn't anything I expected. When I opened it, I found a letter. It was from my mom. The letter was brief but impactful. It read, "You've made your decision, Sam. But know this. When you need family, we won't be there. And you'll be alone. We hope you understand the cost of your choice." I read the letter over and over, my emotions in a whirlwind. I felt a cold sting in my chest, but there was also something else, a strange sense of relief. This was their final attempt to guilt trip me. But I was too far gone now. I couldn't let them pull me back into their web of manipulation. I crumpled the letter up and threw it in the trash. It felt oddly liberating. The more they tried to pull me back, the more I realized that I wasn't the one who needed them. It was them who needed me, and they had taken that for granted for far too long. But as I sat there, a nagging thought crept into my mind. What if they tried something else? Something even more desperate? What if their tactics escalated beyond just words? I didn't know yet, but I was ready for whatever they would throw my way. This time, I wouldn't back down. Not for them, not for anyone. A few days passed, and I managed to push the constant worry about my family to the back of my mind. I was living my life, my real life, without the heavy weight of their expectations on my shoulders. But then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, I got another call. This time, it was from my mom. For a brief moment, I considered not answering, but a part of me, despite everything, still wanted to know what they would say next. So, I picked up. "Sam," my mom's voice was calm but strained, almost like she was treading carefully. "We need to talk." I took a deep breath. I had steeled myself for this. "What's this about?" I asked, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. Look, I know you're angry," she said. "And I know you think I've been unfair to you, but we need to talk about James. He's in real trouble." There it was. The guilt trip. My stomach clenched, but I didn't let it show. "Mom, you can't keep putting this on me. I've done everything for him, and he keeps messing up. I can't keep bailing him out." "I know," she said, her voice suddenly breaking. "But you have to understand, Sam. James isn't over his head. He's spiraling, and he's been arrested." I froze, the words hanging in the air like a weight I couldn't escape. I hadn't been expecting this. My heart started to race. "Arrested? What happened?" There was a long pause, and when she finally spoke again, it was in a quieter, almost defeated tone. "He was caught in some kind of financial scam. He trusted the wrong people, and now he's facing charges. They're threatening to send him to jail." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. James had always been reckless, but this felt different. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Sympathy? Guilt? "Is he okay?" I asked, despite myself. "Physically, yeah," she said, but I could hear the weight of everything in her voice. "But he's not okay, Sam. And I don't know what to do. He needs you. We need you." I bit my lip. I had been waiting for them to pull something like this. But hearing the desperation in her voice, it hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just about money or favors anymore. It was about something far more serious. Something that felt like it could change everything. "Mom, I don't know what you want me to do," I said, my voice faltering. "I've already given him everything. I've given you everything. And you just keep asking for more." "I know," she whispered, almost as if ashamed. "I never meant for it to get this far. But you're the only one who can help him now. Please, Sam. He's your brother." For a moment, the silence between us stretched on, heavy with unspoken words. I felt my resolve wavering. Part of me wanted to just walk away, to keep living my life without the constant pull of their problems. But another part of me, the part that had always been there for them, was fighting the urge to say no. "You've hurt me, too, Mom," I said quietly. "All these years, I've been the one you leaned on, but no one ever asked how I felt. No one ever cared about what I needed." "I'm sorry, Sam," she said, and there was no anger in her voice this time. Just regret. "I know I've made mistakes, but you're all I have left. Please, just think about it. James needs you, and I don't know what I'd do without you." The weight of her words hung in the air, and for the first time, I started to feel like I was the one being tested. I had walked away once, but now it felt like the stakes were higher. I didn't want to be the person who abandoned family in their darkest hour, but I also couldn't go back to being the person who was always expected to fix everything. "Let me think about it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I understand," she replied, and we hung up. The following days were a whirlwind. I found myself constantly replaying the conversation in my mind. I couldn't shake the image of James, alone, in trouble, and desperate. I was torn between wanting to help and not wanting to fall back into the same old patterns. But I also knew something had to change. This cycle couldn't go on forever. So, I did what I'd promised myself I wouldn't. I gave in. I reached out to a lawyer and helped James with his legal troubles. I couldn't let him face the consequences of his actions alone. But this time, it wasn't the same as before. I wasn't giving him the money to bail him out. I wasn't solving all his problems. I was setting boundaries. I was doing what I needed to do to ensure that, if things ever got better, they would stay better. And while things weren't perfect, James was still the same old James, and my mom was still holding on to her expectations. I realized something. It wasn't about completely cutting them off. It was about finding balance. I could help, but I wouldn't lose myself in the process. In the end, I learned that sometimes taking care of family doesn't mean giving them everything they ask for. It means knowing when to step back, when to set boundaries, and when to demand respect for myself and for the life I had built. When you grow up being the good kid, people assume you're fine with anything. They pile responsibilities on you, expect perfect grades, ask for favors without saying thank you, and trust that you'll just smile and keep going. And I did for years. My name's Wesley, I'm 24, and up until a few months ago, I lived at home with my parents and my younger sister, Brielle. She's 21, dropped out of college, got pregnant with twins, and now everyone acts like she's some kind of saint for it. But before I say something I can't take back, let me just tell you how this all started, because I swear, I never planned to get revenge. At first, I just wanted peace. Things hadn't always been tense between us. Growing up, Brielle and I were close. I taught her how to ride a bike. We used to stay up watching cartoons together, and she used to call me her hero. But somewhere around high school, things shifted. She started getting into trouble, minor at first, skipping classes, partying too much, always blaming someone else when things went wrong. And each time she messed up, it was like my parents leaned harder on me. Wesley, can you pick up your sister from school? Wes, take her to her part-time job. She missed the bus again. I never complained. I figured that's what big brothers do. After college, I moved back home to save money while I worked my IT job remotely. I paid rent, helped with groceries, and did my part around the house. I even used a chunk of my savings to buy a used black Corolla, a reliable little car I kept spotless because I treated it like a symbol of the independence I was slowly earning. Meanwhile, Brielle got pregnant and everything changed. My parents freaked out at first. Mom cried. Dad walked around in stunned silence for days. But once the twins were born, it was like they flipped a switch. Suddenly, Brielle was the brave young mother, the family's pride. They decorated her room with cribs and pastel wallpaper, filled the kitchen with organic baby food, and rearranged their lives around her needs. And I didn't mind, not at first. Babies are hard work, and I figured she needed the support. But then, the shift started. I noticed it one night after dinner. Mom was washing dishes, humming to herself. Dad was scrolling through his phone. Brielle was bouncing one of the babies on her hip, and I was clearing the table. Wesley, Dad said without looking up, we were talking. Brielle could use your room. I stopped mid-step. What? Just temporarily, Mom added quickly. She needs more space for the babies. You'll be fine in the basement. I looked at them, waiting for the punchline. Our basement wasn't finished. It had concrete floors, exposed pipes, and a smell like old laundry and mildew no matter how many dehumidifiers we ran. She can't even fit both cribs in her room anymore, Mom said. And you're barely in there, working all day. It's not just about space, Brielle chimed in. I'm up all night with the babies. The crying's keeping you up, right? This way we all get sleep. I could barely get a word in. It was already decided. That's how it worked in our house. Make the choice, then pretend it's a group decision. I nodded, said, okay, and moved downstairs that night. I didn't sleep well. The basement was cold and lonely, and the walls echoed with the sound of pipes groaning every time someone flushed upstairs. My mattress was on the floor. I used an old extension cord to plug in a lamp and set up my laptop on a plastic table. No one came to check how I was doing. Not even Brielle. The next morning, I came upstairs to make coffee. Brielle was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone. My car keys weren't in the bowl where I always left them. Hey, I asked, you seen my keys? Oh, she said casually. I took the car. The babies had a checkup. Hope you don't mind. I stood there for a moment. You took my car? I was going to ask last night, but you were already downstairs. She didn't even look up. I'll be back before lunch. That was the first time I felt the sharp sting, not just of disrespect, but of being invisible. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't asked. My property was just hers now, apparently, and no one said a word. And that pattern repeated. Over the next week, she took my car 3 more times, once without even telling me, which made me late for a client call. I tried bringing it up to Mom and Dad, gently at first. She just needs a little help right now, Mom said, brushing it off. You're being selfish, Wesley. Selfish. That word stung. After everything I'd done, after years of being the reliable one, the good son, by the time Sunday rolled around, I was stewing. I didn't say anything. I just kept the peace. But it was like every day brought a new reminder that I didn't really matter. I was a backup plan, an extra body in the house they could shuffle around when it suited them. And I started to think, if I vanished tomorrow, would they even notice? Or would they just turn my basement bed into storage space for Brielle's diapers? The answer came faster than I thought. One Thursday evening, after a long day of work and no coffee, Brielle had taken the car again, and I couldn't get to the store. Dad came downstairs. I was sitting on the edge of my mattress, eating cold leftovers off a paper plate. He didn't even knock. Just opened the door and stepped in like it was a utility closet. Your sister needs the car full-time now, he said, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. I blinked. Excuse me. She's got appointments, daycare visits, grocery runs. You don't even leave the house most days. It's my car, I said slowly, calmly. I paid for it. I insure it. I bought it with my own money. And she's your family, he said flatly. Family supports each other. By taking their stuff? He raised his voice then, just a little. You're not special anymore, Wesley. You're a grown man living in our basement. Your sister has twins. She needs the space. She needs the car. Be useful for once. Useful. That word echoed in my chest like a dropped brick. I nodded, very slowly. Okay. He looked almost surprised. Maybe he expected a fight. Maybe he thought I'd shout or cry. But I didn't. I just stared at him until he left. Then I sat in the dim light for a long, long time, listening to the pipes rattle over my head. That night, I didn't sleep either. But I didn't toss and turn. I was thinking, planning. By Saturday, my aunt and uncle were visiting. We hadn't seen them in a while. Dad's sister and her husband, both pretty well off, both pretty vocal about how much they adored Brielle and the babies. Everyone was laughing upstairs, the smell of roast chicken filling the house. I stayed in the basement. Not out of spite, but because I had something to finish. And then, I heard it. My aunt's voice, sharp and startled, echoing down the staircase. Oh my goodness, what is this? The whole house went quiet. You could have heard a pacifier drop. I didn't move. I just waited. Quietly. Calmly. Because the moment she opened that basement door was exactly what I had planned for. And that's where things really began. She gasped so loud it made the twins start crying. My aunt, Melissa, had always been the more dramatic of my dad's siblings. Big hair, louder voice, allergic to silence. But this gasp? It was different. It wasn't theatrical. It was real. You could hear the disgust in her throat. Shock. Confusion. Her heels clicked slowly on the steps as she descended halfway, probably expecting to see me watching TV or playing video games in some messy bachelor den. Instead, she found what looked like a cold, makeshift bunker. The smell of mildew hit her first. Then her eyes landed on the exposed pipes. The bare concrete walls. My mattress on the floor. My laptop sitting on 2 stacked crates because I didn't even have a real desk anymore. Oh no. No, she muttered. Wesley. I looked up from the laptop screen. Hey. She blinked. You're sleeping down here? I nodded. Yep. She didn't move. But where's your bed? Your furniture. Gave them up, I said with a straight face. My room's upstairs now. For Brielle. And the twins. There was this heavy pause. A silence so dense you could feel the walls vibrating with it. And then, behind her, I heard more footsteps. Thudding. Hesitant. Uncle Dan peeked over her shoulder. His eyes darted across the room and narrowed. What in the world? And just like that, the mood upstairs shifted. From laughter to tension. From roast chicken to exposed secrets. Because Aunt Melissa didn't go back up quietly. She stormed. Heels pounding, voice rising. And I sat there listening like I was underwater. Every word she shouted muffled but sharp enough to cut through the walls. You moved him into the basement? Are you kidding me, Matthew? He pays rent. That was the first time anyone said it out loud. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't need to. The damage was already done. But something cracked open that day. A small fissure in the mask my parents wore. A hairline fracture in the narrative they loved to tell. That everything was fair. That I was just being dramatic. That Brielle deserved all this help because her life was harder. And once that crack formed, things started to slide. In the days that followed, I noticed how little eye contact Mom made when she passed me. How Brielle became more passive-aggressive than usual, like she was mad I hadn't kept our arrangement quiet. But I never said a word to Aunt Melissa. I didn't need to. She saw everything. And she started calling me, once, twice a week, just to check in. Meanwhile, back at home, things kept unraveling. 2 weeks later, I opened the fridge to find half my meal prep gone. Not just one container, 3 of them. Gone. Poof. I'd started cooking for myself separately, labeling everything clearly, trying to draw some boundaries. Apparently, that meant nothing. I confronted Brielle in the living room. She was lounging with a bowl of chips, one twin on her chest, the other asleep in a bassinet. Hey, I said. You see the containers labeled Wes? They're missing. She barely glanced up. Yeah. Mom said I could have them. I stared at her. You didn't ask me? They were just sitting there, she said with a shrug. And you always make too much. I clenched my jaw. That's not the point. Well, maybe don't leave food in a shared fridge if you don't want people touching it. I took a deep breath. This isn't college. We're not roommates. No, she said, leaning back smugly. We're family, which means sharing. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. But inside, I was boiling. That same night, I tried locking the fridge with one of those dumb cable locks I ordered online. Dad saw me doing it and lost his mind. Are you insane? Locking up food like this is prison. I turned around calmly. Then stopped treating me like a prisoner. He flinched, just for a second, then stormed off muttering something about attitude problems. The next day, the lock was mysteriously gone, cut clean with wire cutters, sitting on the counter like a decapitated warning. That was when I realized something important. This wasn't just about Brielle anymore. This was about control, about power. I'd always been the obedient son, the one who didn't make waves. And now that I was drawing boundaries, locking up my food, asking for my car back, expecting respect, they didn't know what to do with me. I was no longer convenient. And then came the final straw. The moment I knew, deep in my gut, that this wasn't just mistreatment. It was betrayal. It started with a phone call. I was in the basement, on a Zoom call with a client, when my phone buzzed with a text from my insurance company. Something about policy changes. At first, I ignored it. But then I checked it during lunch. And my stomach dropped. It said my auto insurance policy had been updated. A new primary driver added. Brielle. I blinked. Reread the message 5 times. My car. My insurance. And somehow, my sister was now listed as the primary driver. I immediately called the company. The agent was polite, but firm. Yes, it looks like the change was requested last week and verified over the phone. With what proof? She answered the security questions, he said, including your date of birth and policy number. That's when I realized my parents. They had access to my paperwork. I'd kept it in a file cabinet in my old room. They must have dug through it. When I asked Brielle directly, she didn't even deny it. It's just easier this way, she said. I'm the one using it. It's fraud, I replied. You impersonated me. Don't be so dramatic, she snapped. You're not going to use that car anymore. You never go anywhere. I couldn't speak. I physically couldn't form the words. My hands were shaking. My ears were ringing. That night, I confronted my parents. I sat them both down at the kitchen table and laid it all out. How this wasn't just unfair, it was illegal. How I felt like I didn't even exist to them anymore. Dad crossed his arms. It's just insurance, Wesley. Mom added. Why are you making this so hostile? Your sister needs help. You're acting like we're criminals. You are, I said flatly. You went through my documents. You impersonated me. You changed my policy. That's a crime. That's when Dad stood up. I'm done with this attitude. You want to act like a stranger? Fine. From now on, you live here under our rules, or not at all. And there it was. The unspoken threat. The quiet war. The line drawn. I've been under your roof, sure, I said quietly. But I've paid rent. I've paid for the car. For groceries. For my own everything. You're not special, he said. Cold. Icy. Like it was rehearsed. You're just a boy in our basement. That sentence stuck with me for days. Like gum in your shoe. Like a nail in your tire. Just there. Always there. You're not special. I stopped speaking to them after that. I'd come upstairs only when I had to. Work during the day. Microwave whatever scraps I had at night. My laptop became my sanctuary. I even installed a little Wi-Fi repeater so I wouldn't have to leave the basement for signal. Days bled into each other. I barely saw sunlight. And yet, somehow, Brielle still needed more. Because 3 days later, I came home from a grocery run and found all my clothes on the basement floor. My dresser was gone. I stood there, stunned, looking at my folded t-shirts and underwear sitting neatly in piles. Like someone had carefully removed them to take the furniture without damaging anything. My desk chair was also gone. I went upstairs, heart racing. Found Brielle sitting in my old desk chair, now placed in the corner of the living room. "Oh," she said when she saw me. "Hope you don't mind. The nursery needed a little more storage. Mom said we could use your dresser." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Something in me snapped. Quietly, like a fuse burning out. No explosion. Just darkness. Silence. A shift. And that's when I began planning in earnest. See, what my parents forgot is that I've always been the quiet one. The observant one. The good kid who noticed everything and said nothing. But I remembered details. Passwords. Schedules. How my dad handles paperwork. How my mom talks to the bank. Where the spare keys are hidden. Where Brielle keeps her secret phone for texting her ex when she thinks no one's looking. I didn't need to scream to be dangerous. I just needed time. And now I had nothing but time. And while they laughed upstairs and passed around the twins like little trophies, I sat in the basement with my laptop open, a spreadsheet pulled up, and a plan forming. And it was almost ready. Almost. All I needed was one final confirmation. One little piece. And then, well, then it would all begin. I didn't speak to anyone for 4 days after they took my dresser. Not a word. I ate quietly. Showered late at night when everyone was asleep. Walked in the shadows like some forgotten tenant in my own house. I stopped saying good morning. Stopped answering when they knocked, if they even bothered to knock. I became invisible. And for the first time in my life, I let myself be. You might think that was the worst of it. That rock bottom came when I found my shirts piled on cold concrete. But it didn't. Not yet. Rock bottom came a week later. It started with an email from my job. I work in cybersecurity for a mid-sized fintech company. Fully remote, good pay, chill manager. I was in the middle of writing a script to automate some threat detection logs when I got a Slack ping from my boss. "Hey Wes, can we hop on a call real quick? 5 minutes tops." I didn't think much of it. Probably a quick client update or something about the quarterly review. I clicked the Zoom link. Smiled. "Hey, what's up?" And then I saw her face. Tight. Careful. Corporate. "Hey Wesley, this isn't about your performance, just so you know that up front. We've just been notified of some concerning activity flagged from your IP address." Legal looped me in. My stomach dropped. I'm sorry, what? Multiple access attempts on restricted documents. Client reports. Expense audits. Password reset pages. It's all been logged under your device ID. My head spun. I never know. That's not me. I work with threat detection, sure, but I never touch client data. She sighed. "We believe you. Your behavior doesn't match. But the forensics are pointing to someone in your household. That's where it gets complicated." And then she said the words that broke me. "We're putting you on temporary leave until this gets sorted." My screen went blurry. I barely remember ending the call. My hands were shaking. My mouth dry. I sprinted upstairs like a madman. Stormed into the kitchen. Brielle was there, of course. Always there. Sitting with one baby on her lap and the other strapped to her chest. Scrolling TikTok like nothing existed outside of her little bubble. "Did you go on my laptop?" I asked, voice low but quaking. She didn't even look up. "What?" "My work laptop. Did you touch it?" She blinked. "No? Why would I?" "You were on it last week. I saw the history." I snapped. "I thought it was just Netflix, but now I'm on leave. They traced access to our home IP." She stared at me blankly, then laughed. "Oh my God, are you accusing me of hacking? What even is that job of yours anyway?" "I'm not accusing," I said through clenched teeth. "I'm telling you, if you or anyone else in this house accessed my files." Dad walked in mid-sentence. "Wesley, what's going on?" "She compromised my work," I said. Someone used my laptop. Now I'm on leave. Dad looked at Brielle, then at me, and then he rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. That's paranoid. Who in this house even understands half the junk you do on that computer? I do, I said quietly. I understand enough to know that if I get fired, I lose my health care, my income, my rent. That's when Mom appeared behind me, holding a spoon, stirring soup like nothing was happening. You don't pay rent anymore, remember? She said, gently. We waived it when Brielle moved upstairs. Said you'd contribute in other ways. That hit me like a gut punch. No, you didn't, I said. You took my room. You took my car. You cut my food lock. And now my job's on the line because someone in this house can't respect boundaries. They all just stood there. No apologies. No explanations. Just the same hollow expressions I'd seen every time I tried to stand up for myself. Something shattered in me. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a breakdown. It was worse. I just turned around, walked back downstairs, and sat on the floor for hours. No laptop. No music. Just silence. The babies cried above me. The pipes groaned. The world spun. And I broke. I let myself feel every bit of it. The humiliation. The loneliness. The bitterness I'd been swallowing for years. I was 24. Jobless. Carless. Living in a basement like a squatter, fighting for scraps of dignity in a house that raised me. And the people I once trusted most treated me like I was disposable. That was rock bottom. And from that exact point, I started to climb. First step? Document everything. I bought a tiny used ThinkPad for $90 on Craigslist. Didn't tell anyone. Hid it under the loose tile near the water heater. Then I set up packet sniffing on our Wi-Fi router. Every device, every session, every packet logged and timestamped. Brielle's secret browsing habits? Logged. My dad's late-night visits to sketchy sites on his phone? Logged. My mom's online orders charged to my Amazon account? Logged. Yeah, she figured out how to use the stored card without the OTP somehow. Real classy. Within 3 weeks, I had enough to fill a binder. But I didn't stop there. I started freelancing. Quietly. Anonymously. Picked up some short-term cybersecurity gigs on Upwork and a private Discord I used to lurk in during college. Paid in crypto at first, then shifted to a private PayPal business account using an alias. I bought a second phone. Cheap burner model, prepaid SIM. Stored it under a loose panel in the ceiling with a magnet mount. I worked at night. Slept during the day. Ate protein bars and instant ramen. Trained myself like a ghost. And as I worked, something strange happened. I started to like it. The silence. The discipline. The isolation. Because for the first time, I was in control. I built routines. Coded scripts. Solved real-world problems for people who valued my skills. I started exercising too, just bodyweight stuff. Push-ups, squats, planks. Got a resistance band. It helped me sleep better. Helped me feel stronger. More grounded. By month 2, I had $2,400 in a separate account. Enough for a deposit on a rental, but I wasn't done yet. I wanted more. So I pushed harder. I cold emailed a small cybersecurity firm in Austin that I'd followed for years. Sent them a GitHub repo with some exploit tests I'd written. A resume with no address. No personal details. Just results. The founder wrote back personally. We've never had someone write their own security audit tool from scratch for a job pitch. We need to talk. 2 Zoom calls later, I had an offer. Remote. Full-time. More money than I'd ever made. The job started in 3 weeks. And with it came the power. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I still slept in the basement. Still let them believe I was jobless. Worthless. A burden. I let Brielle roll her eyes when I walked past. Let Dad scoff when I asked about my car. Let Mom sigh every time I microwaved a meal for one. I played my part. Quiet. Passive. Invisible. Because sometimes the best revenge starts with a little patience. But I did change one thing. The basement. I cleaned it top to bottom. Bleached the floors. Fixed the wiring with a little help from YouTube. Hung blackout curtains behind the water heater to create a little divider. And then I set up my space. Not a bedroom. A command center. Dual monitors. New keyboard. Soundproof headphones. Portable AC unit. I built it all in silence. Ordered in parts using gift cards and drop-off lockers. Nothing traceable. They didn't notice. Why would they? They stopped looking years ago. But Aunt Melissa noticed. She called one night and said, I have a feeling something big is coming. I smiled into the phone. You have no idea. And now, With 2 weeks left until I started the new job, with proof of their lies sitting neatly on 3 encrypted USB drives. I was ready. All I needed was one final moment. A trigger. And wouldn't you know it? They handed it to me, wrapped in lies, sealed with a bow. It came in the form of a family dinner invitation. "You're invited," Mom said one night, knocking on the basement door like we were roommates. "Aunt Melissa and Uncle Dan are coming again. Saturday. It's important." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to, because I knew what was coming, and I knew how to use it. Saturday came fast. Too fast, if I'm being honest. Part of me still had doubts. Not about what I was going to do, that part was locked in, but about what it would cost me. You don't spend your whole life craving peace and then light a match this big without at least wondering if it's the right fire to start. But every time I looked around that basement, the patched-up concrete, the exposed water heater, the mattress on the floor, the echo of pipes above my head, I remembered exactly why I had to do it. It wasn't revenge for the sake of revenge. It was correction, balance, a recalibration of the scales my family had smashed with years of entitlement and excuses. And dinner was the perfect opportunity. They thought I was still down, broken, crawling. They had no idea I'd already climbed out of the pit and built a new fortress while they laughed at my collapse. The guest list was the same as last time. Aunt Melissa and Uncle Dan, Mom and Dad, Brielle, the twins. But this time, there were extras: Dad's old business partner, a retired CPA named Lloyd, and Mom's cousin June, who worked in social services. People with opinions. People who believed in the story my parents had spun for years, that I was the responsible one, the quiet genius, the good son, who sacrificed for his family without ever asking for anything back. Now, I was the recluse in the basement, the disappointment. That was the version they were going to parade tonight, and I planned to let them. The table was set when I came upstairs: roast lamb, scalloped potatoes, 3 kinds of salad, and the good china they only used when they wanted to show off. I wore a button-down shirt and clean jeans, shaved for the first time in weeks, and tied my hair back. I looked put together, professional, polished. It caught my mom off guard when I stepped into the kitchen. "Oh, you clean up nice," she said, half smiling. I smiled back, tight. "Thanks." She turned away quickly, like my eye contact was too sharp, like it reminded her I wasn't as docile as she remembered. Brielle gave me a look too, half suspicion, half boredom. She was wearing a low-cut black top with gold hoop earrings and an air of smug victory, like she'd already won whatever game she thought we were playing. And Dad, he didn't even say hello. That was fine. I didn't need him to. The guests arrived just before 6. Hugs, fake laughter, a few, "Oh my God, the twins are so big now," comments tossed around like confetti. I kept to the edge of the room, smiling, watching, noticing who gravitated to whom, who whispered when they thought no one was looking. By the time we all sat down to eat, I'd already mapped out the entire table like a chessboard. I sat next to Uncle Dan, deliberately. He worked in IT before retirement and still kept up with the latest in cybersecurity. He respected me, always had. On his other side was Lloyd, Dad's old business partner. I figured it'd be good for him to overhear some things. I waited until the lamb was carved and the first glass of wine was poured before I spoke. "So," I said, casually, "how's everyone doing with their taxes this year?" That got a laugh. The usual groans followed. "Ugh, don't remind me, hate this time of year. TurboTax is a scam. The works." And then I added, "I just filed mine early. Wanted to make sure everything was clean, you know, especially since someone tried to claim me as a dependent without asking." Silence. Aunt Melissa blinked. "Wait, what?" I turned slightly toward her, still smiling. "Yeah. Weird, right? I got a flag from the IRS portal saying someone else already tried to file with my name attached. Had to open an investigation." Mom's fork paused midair. Dad cleared his throat. "That's nonsense," he said quickly. "Must be some glitch." "Totally," I said, nodding. "Except it wasn't. The IRS traced it to your return, Dad." Everyone froze. Brielle stared at me like I'd just grown horns. Uncle Dan stopped chewing. You tried to claim Wesley as a dependent?" Aunt Melissa asked, frowning. "But he's been paying rent. And working. That's illegal." Dad tried to laugh it off. "It was just a mistake. TurboTax auto-filled it from last year." I leaned forward slightly. "Except I wasn't your dependent last year either. I paid you $700 a month. You cashed every check." Now Mom jumped in. Wesley, that's enough. Let's not make this a spectacle. I turned to her slowly. Oh, I'm not done yet. I reached under the table and pulled out a small envelope. Quietly slid it across to Uncle Dan. These are copies of the checks, front and back, with your husband's signature on every deposit. His hands were shaking slightly as he opened it. Why would you do that? June, the social worker, asked. She was squinting at Dad now. Do you realize that's tax fraud? She's exaggerating, Mom said quickly. It's not that serious. She's a he, I said flatly. And yeah, it is that serious. I took a deep breath. This next part, I'd rehearsed it 100 times. I've been living in a basement with no proper flooring, no windows, no insulation. I paid rent for a room you gave away. You took my car. You accessed my private documents to change my insurance. You let someone log into my work laptop and compromise client data. And when I lost my job, you laughed behind my back. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I watched the color drain from Dad's face. Watched Mom's jaw tighten. Brielle looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. I looked directly at my parents. You treated me like I was disposable. And that's fine. But don't act surprised when people start treating you the same way. June cleared her throat, suddenly looking very professional. Wesley, would you be willing to share any of that documentation with me? I nodded. Absolutely. I've backed it all up. Twice. That was when Aunt Melissa sat up straighter. I knew something was wrong. That basement is a hazard. And you made him live down there like a dog. Don't be dramatic, Mom snapped. He chose that. No, I didn't, I said. You told me I had to. Uncle Dan chimed in then, his voice calm but cold. I thought Wesley moved down there to help with the babies. But this sounds like exploitation. It is, I said simply. And I've documented every minute of it. And then, right on cue, came the cherry on top. A knock at the door. Everyone froze. Mom stood up, frowning. Who? I'll get it, I said, walking calmly to the front door. I opened it to reveal a woman in a blazer and a man holding a small case. My witnesses. One was a family advocate I'd connected with through June months earlier. The other was a housing inspector. They both smiled politely. Evening. We're here for the inspection. I stepped aside. Come on in. Mom's face went white. Dad stood up so fast his chair nearly fell over. What is this? What are you doing? I looked at him, the way he used to look at me when I disappointed him as a kid. I'm setting the record straight. The inspector walked through the hallway, clipboard in hand. The advocate followed, introducing herself to June. Brielle started whispering frantically, and Mom was already reaching for her phone. Don't bother calling the lawyer, I said. I already did. He agrees with me. Uncle Dan leaned back in his chair and let out a long, low whistle. Damn, kid. You planned this whole thing, didn't you? I just smiled. And that was only phase one. Because I hadn't even told them about the trust fund yet. Or the letter. Or the lawyer's letter I'd scheduled to arrive Monday morning, delivered straight to my dad's office. They say revenge is best served cold, but that night it was served on fine china, with scalloped potatoes and a side of stunned silence. The inspector spent 20 minutes in the basement. I didn't go down with him. I didn't need to. I already knew what he'd find. Lack of ventilation, no emergency egress, mold exposure, and clear signs someone had been living there without the bare minimum legal accommodations. You'd be surprised how easy it is to prepare an illegal housing report when you work in cybersecurity and know your way around digital forms and state databases. The family advocate, Shauna, took pictures, wrote notes, and kept her voice even as she asked my mother-pointed questions like, so you knowingly moved your adult son into this space without a window or proper fire escape. Did you ever deduct rent from him for this space? Were any repairs or improvements made when he moved in? My mom kept stammering. Dad tried to interrupt. Brielle kept saying, I didn't know any of this was illegal, like that cleared her of any responsibility. June, the social worker, had gone stone-faced. Aunt Melissa just sat back and watched like she was finally seeing the third act of a drama she'd been trying to understand for years. And me? I sat down at the table, calm, sipping water, letting it all unfold. When the inspection wrapped, the inspector handed a copy of the report to Shauna and nodded at me. I'll submit this to housing authorities on Monday. He's got a solid case if he wants to take this further. I do, I said plainly. That was the first time I saw my father truly panicked. His voice went sharp. Wesley, don't be stupid. You want to bring in the government over a misunderstanding. I stood up. Misunderstanding? You moved me into an illegal space, accessed my personal documents without consent, filed false tax information, and endangered my job by allowing unauthorized access to confidential files. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a pattern. My voice didn't shake. Not once. Dad's face turned red. We gave you a place to live. You sold me on obedience. And when I stopped complying, you took everything I had left. So now I'm taking it back. Before he could respond, I pulled a thick envelope from my jacket and dropped it on the table. This is a letter from my attorney. It contains a formal demand for reimbursement of the rent I paid while being housed in an uninhabitable space, damages for potential loss of employment, and documentation of identity fraud related to my insurance and taxes. You have 10 business days to respond. Mom clutched her wine glass like it was a life raft. Wesley, we're family. No, I said, shaking my head. You stopped being that the moment you let her. I nodded at Brielle. Treat me like I was the family butler. Brielle scoffed. Oh, come on. This whole thing is because you're jealous of my babies. Grow up. I turned to her. You're the same person who thought you could hijack my car and my life because you had twins. I hope you take better care of them than you took of your own brother. Her face twisted into something bitter, but I didn't let her speak. I was done being interrupted. You all wanted me small, obedient, quiet, and now you're shocked I found my voice. And then I pulled the final card. Another envelope. Smaller. Personal. I wasn't going to share this tonight, I said, but now feels like the right time. I handed it to Aunt Melissa. She opened it, slowly. Read the first few lines. Her hand went to her mouth. Oh my God, what is it? Dad asked. She looked up, eyes wide. It's from your father. A handwritten codicil to his will. Mom blinked. Your father? He's been gone for years. Yes, I said. And apparently before he died, he amended the terms of the inheritance. He left me his entire share of the family trust. Not Brielle. Not either of you. Just me. The table exploded into overlapping voices. That's not possible. He said everything was divided evenly. He wouldn't do that. But Melissa, who had handled some of the estate affairs after my grandfather's death, kept reading. Then she looked at me and whispered, How long have you known? Since last year, I said. He mailed it to me directly. Said I was the only one he trusted to carry on the family legacy. He saw what you were becoming, and he didn't want his name tied to it. Dad tried to laugh, but it sounded hollow. That's not legally binding. We had everything notarized. Except this, I said, which was legally witnessed by 2 of his caretakers, both of whom I've already spoken to. One gave me a sworn affidavit. The other sent a video. I tapped my phone. And if you want to contest it, you can. But my attorney's already expecting it. Just know, the court will see everything I've recorded. Every text. Every bank transfer. Every cent. Mom was pale now. Really pale. Her lips were tight. Silent. Brielle? She stood up, grabbed her phone, and stormed out. No one stopped her. Uncle Dan finally spoke again, his voice low. What are you going to do? I looked around the table. At the people who'd either hurt me or watch me get hurt. I'm leaving, I said. I signed the lease for my new apartment yesterday. Moving out by Monday. But before I go, I'm clearing my name. I'm reporting the illegal tenancy. I'm filing for tax identity abuse. And I'm making sure every relevant party knows what happened here. Dad slumped into his chair. You'd destroy your own parents over this? You already destroyed yourselves, I said. I'm just putting the pieces where they belong. Aunt Melissa stood up and hugged me. Tight. Whispered in my ear. He'd be proud of you. Your grandfather. He always said you had fire. You just needed the right moment to let it burn. And it burned. The fallout wasn't dramatic, not at first. I left Monday morning with everything I owned in 2 duffel bags and a hard drive. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. My new apartment was small, clean, and full of light. I bought myself a used car 3 weeks later. Started the new job. Found my rhythm again. 2 months later, the housing board fined my parents $8,000 for the illegal basement dwelling. My tax case went through. I was awarded a refund and opened an investigation into identity misrepresentation. Brielle lost custody of the twins temporarily because the court flagged her living situation as unstable, and her ex filed a petition with the photos I'd taken of the chaos upstairs. I hadn't planned that, but I didn't stop it either. As for the trust fund, still tied up in probate. But the courts are leaning in my favor. Strongly. Melissa's backing me. So are the caretakers. And the attorney who helped file the codicil told me that with my documentation, it's not even a close call. I haven't spoken to my parents since I left. Not once. They sent a letter. No apology. Just complaints. Accusations. Guilt tripping. I shredded it. Because I'm done explaining myself to people who never listened. I built something in that basement. Not just a computer rig or a case file, but me. A version of myself that doesn't flinch. That doesn't beg. That doesn't settle for crumbs at a table he helped build. I'm no longer the quiet son in the basement. I'm the storm they never saw coming. And I'm just getting started. Thank you for listening to my story. Hi Reddit, my name's Liam. I'm 23, and until very recently, I thought I was just doing what any good son would do, supporting his family when they needed it. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon or even a plastic one. Our family scraped by month to month, and even though I wasn't exactly rolling in cash after college, I chipped in where I could. What I didn't realize, what took me way too long to accept, was that I wasn't helping a family. I was enabling them. And this last Christmas, that was the moment it all snapped. To understand why this hit so hard, I should backtrack a bit. Growing up, things were always a little uneven. My mom, Denise, was a single parent who played the martyr like it was her full-time job. If she paid for dinner, you heard about it for weeks. If she skipped buying herself something to get us clothes, it was a whole production. I could have had a new coat, but no, Liam needed sneakers. She'd sigh loud enough for the neighbors to hear. And my little sister, Bella, spoiled to the bone. Anything she wanted, she got, eventually. I was told to be the man of the house at 12. Bella was told she was a princess and acted like one every day of her life. I didn't question it much when I was younger. That was just life. I got a job at 15, handed over half my paycheck to help with groceries, and studied hard enough to land a small scholarship for community college. But I couldn't dorm or live away, obviously. We need you here, Mom said. Think of your sister. Think of me. So I stayed. After graduating 2 years ago, I finally landed a halfway decent job in IT. Remote work, good hours, and most importantly, my own money. That's when things started shifting. At first, it was subtle. Mom would joke that now I was making big bucks, I could finally give her the life she deserved. Then it turned into expectations. Your rent is due, by the way, she'd say, even though I wasn't on a lease and she didn't own the house. I was paying for her rent, her groceries, her car insurance. My rent was $1,200 a month for a room with a leaky ceiling and no lock. Still, I kept going. I told myself she was struggling. I told myself Bella was still a kid, even though she was 20 and working part-time at a boutique only when she felt like it. They both acted like I was doing the bare minimum. I didn't have the heart, or maybe the courage, to say no. But I was tired. Bone-deep tired. I had dreams of saving for my own place, maybe traveling a little. I wanted space. Independence. But every time I tried to bring it up, Mom would say, "After all I've done for you?" And Bella would roll her eyes and call me selfish. Fast forward to this past December. Christmas at our house was always a weird affair. My mom loved the image of being a festive, giving, wonderful mother, but in practice, it was all about appearances. We had lights and a tree, but most of the gifts under it were things I'd bought and wrapped. She made a show of writing the tags in fancy cursive from Mom, but they were things I ordered on Amazon with my card. I never complained. I figured it was worth it to keep the peace. But this year, the resentment was eating at me. The night before Christmas, I overheard Mom on the phone with one of her sisters. She was laughing, saying how she didn't know what she'd do without her little ATM. That stung. I didn't even confront her. I just sat there in the dark, listening to her talk about me like I was nothing more than a bank account. Christmas morning came. Everyone was gathered in the living room, Mom in her robe, Bella in her new fuzzy slippers that I bought, and my aunt and cousins, who stopped by for brunch. I handed out the presents as usual. Bella squealed over the new perfume she got. My mom held up the necklace I'd spent 2 weeks picking out. Everyone was smiling. Then Mom did something unexpected. She stood up, holding her coffee like she was making a toast. "I just want to say," she said sweetly, "that even though it's been a hard year, we've made it through together. Mostly thanks to Bella's spirit," she added, putting a hand on my sister's shoulder and me holding this family together. I blinked. No mention of me. No thanks. Not even a nod in my direction. I was about to let it go. Just smile, fake it, survive the day. But then she looked right at me, still in front of everyone, and said, "And as for Liam, well, not everyone can carry their weight, but we love him anyway." The room went silent. "What?" I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She smiled, this fake, pitying smile that made my stomach churn. You've been nothing but a burden this year, but we're family. We forgive you. That was it. That was the sentence. 7 words that shattered years of quiet resentment and sacrifice. I stared at her, then around the room. Nobody said anything. Bella looked vaguely amused. My aunt sipped her mimosa. I felt this weird sensation, like the walls were closing in, but also like I'd finally opened a window in my head and could breathe again. Good to know, I said, standing up. My voice came out calm, scarily calm. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded, walked back to my room, and started packing. I left that afternoon. The next day, I blocked them all, Mom, Bella, even my aunt. I didn't leave a note. No explanation. I found a cheap Airbnb on the edge of town and started apartment hunting immediately. I had savings. I had a plan. What they didn't have was rent money. Because, as it turned out, I wasn't just paying my part. I was paying all of it. And they? They had no clue how much of their life I was holding up. It only took 3 days for the first message to come through. Even though I'd blocked their numbers, I still had email, and apparently my mom remembered how to use it when she needed something. The subject line was short. Just rent. The body of the email? Barely 5 sentences. Liam, I don't know where you went, but your childish tantrum has put us in a very difficult position. Rent is due, and I need your portion as soon as possible. Bella's hours were cut, and I'm already behind on utilities. You're making things harder than they need to be. Be an adult. Mom, not, how are you? Not, can we talk? Just straight to business. I stared at the screen for a good 10 minutes, heart pounding, before I closed my laptop and let the silence swallow me. Part of me wanted to write back, to remind her of everything I'd done, to spell it out in black and white, but another part of me, a louder part now, whispered, why should you explain yourself to people who never listened anyway? That silence became addictive. For once, no one was banging on my door asking for a favor. No one was guilt-tripping me about Wi-Fi bills or vet visits for a dog I never asked for. I had my own space. A single room with a wobbly chair, mismatched curtains, and creaky floorboards. But it was mine. But peace doesn't last long when entitled people realize the golden goose is gone. On day 5, the emails turned into calls from random numbers, unknown and local. I didn't answer. Then the Facebook messages started, even though I hadn't posted in months. Bella tried first. OMG, you are so dramatic. You just left? Really? You know Mom can't pay the rent alone. Yes, that makes you the selfish one now. I didn't respond. Instead, I kept moving forward. Found a 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city, not fancy, but clean and quiet. I signed the lease 2 weeks later, paid my own deposit, turned on my own lights, stocked my own fridge with whatever I wanted. Chicken nuggets and almond milk and enough frozen pizza to last an apocalypse. The peace was fragile, though. Every time I heard a phone buzz, my gut twisted. Every time I saw an email pop up with Mom's name in the corner, I felt like I was 17 again, waiting to be scolded for not doing enough. Then, about a week after I moved in, I got a call from my grandmother. She rarely got involved in family drama, but she was one of the only people I hadn't cut off. I picked up, expecting a gentle check-in. What I got instead was a full-blown guilt trip. Liam, honey, she started, her voice laced with tension, I got a very concerning call from your mother. She says you abandoned them without notice and that now they're facing eviction. Is that true? I let out a slow breath. I didn't abandon anyone, Grandma. I left because I was being used. She hesitated. I understand you've had your issues, but family's supposed to support each other. It's not right to just disappear. I bit my tongue. Family supports each other? Where was that support when I was skipping meals so Bella could go on school trips? Where was that support when I handed over my entire paycheck and got called a burden in return? Grandma, I said quietly, did Mom tell you I've been paying all the rent for the last 6 months? That I bought every single Christmas present under the tree, including the ones she said were from her? That she said I was a burden on Christmas morning in front of everyone? There was a pause on the line. A long one. She didn't mention that. Of course she didn't. Another pause. I just wish you would have talked to someone before leaving. I tried, I said, voice hard now. For years. Nobody listened. That was the end of that conversation. After that call, I decided to finally check the voicemail that had been piling up. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I just wanted to hear what they were really saying when they thought I wasn't listening. I listened to one from my mom, 3 days after I left. Liam, I don't know what you think you're proving, but you're being childish. This little game of yours is hurting your family. Bella's crying. I can barely sleep, and we're going to be out on the street if you don't come back and help. This is your home too, but maybe I was wrong to think you cared. If we get evicted, that's on you." The next one? "Bella, you think you're some kind of martyr or something? Newsflash, you chose to pay stuff. No one put a gun to your head. Grow up and stop blaming mom for everything. We're the ones suffering now because you couldn't handle a little responsibility." I laughed out loud. A little responsibility? They were shameless. By now, the rent was probably long overdue. I didn't know for sure, but I had a pretty good guess they were panicking. I'd changed my direct deposit, canceled my linked PayPal and Venmo. I left nothing they could access, and I didn't tell them where I moved. They had no way to find me unless I wanted to be found. Then came the twist. 3 weeks after Christmas, I got an envelope in the mail with no return address. Just my name, written in my mom's handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a printed letter. "Liam, I hope you're proud of yourself. We got a notice from the landlord. We have until the 15th to pay, or we're being evicted. I told you this would happen. I always knew you didn't care about this family, but I never thought you'd go this far. You are not welcome here anymore. If you don't step up and fix this, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did." Mom, no signature. No love. Just blame. I sat there with the letter in my hands, rereading it over and over. And the anger that had been simmering for weeks turned into something colder, clearer. She thought she could guilt me back into submission. She thought threatening to turn the family against me would bring me crawling back. What she didn't realize, what she'd never realized, was that I'd already spent years carrying guilt I didn't earn. And now that I was free of it, I wasn't going back. But I also wasn't done. That was the moment I decided it was time to stop being quiet. If they wanted to act like I was the villain, I was going to show them exactly what I'd been holding up. And I had the receipts. I didn't even wait a day. After reading that letter, something in me snapped, not in a rage kind of way, but in this oddly calm, focused clarity. Like I'd just put down a 100-pound weight I'd been carrying for years and realized I had both hands free now. So I opened my laptop. The first thing I did was pull up my banking history. I started gathering everything: rent payments, utility bills, grocery store receipts, everything I'd paid for over the last 12 months. Then I opened a spreadsheet and began logging each expense, line by line. Rent, $1,200 per month. Electric, $140 average. Groceries, at least $400 monthly, usually more around the holidays. Cell phone bill, water, Bella's car insurance. Yeah, I was covering that too, Mom's Netflix account, and even the vet bills for Bella's cat, Muffin. By the time I finished, the total was just under $21,000. $21,000. I stared at that number for a long time. I was 23 years old, and I'd spent more than most people earn in a year on a family that now called me selfish and dramatic for walking away. A family that never once thanked me, not even on Christmas morning. And that's when the idea hit me. If they wanted to paint me as the villain to the rest of the family, maybe it was time everyone knew exactly what I'd been doing. I didn't want revenge that involved shouting or drama. I wanted truth. Cold, clean, undeniable truth. So I started writing. The email took me 3 hours to craft. I started with a simple greeting and laid out the timeline of events as clearly and neutrally as possible. I explained that I had moved out, that I was no longer financially supporting Mom and Bella, and that while I didn't owe anyone an explanation, I wanted to set the record straight. I included the spreadsheet, along with screenshots of every transaction. I even attached a photo of the letter my mom had sent me, the one threatening to tell the family what I did. Then, at the very end, I wrote, "If anyone still thinks I'm selfish after seeing all this, feel free to stop contacting me too. I'm not angry. I'm just done." And I hit send. I sent it to every relative I had an email for on both sides of the family. The fallout started just hours later. The first response came from my Uncle Greg, Mom's older brother. He was always a bit of a wild card, but I'd liked him growing up. His reply was short and to the point. "You've been carrying them this whole time?" "Liam, I had no idea." "I'm sorry, man. Let me know if you need anything." Then came a few more messages. Cousins, aunts. Even one of my mom's church friends who I barely knew wrote back saying, "I always wondered why Denise never seemed to work. Now it makes sense." But the most surprising email came from my grandmother. "Liam, I owe you an apology. After hearing your side and seeing the numbers, I realize I was wrong to pressure you. You've done more than your share. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Please keep in touch. I miss you. Love, Grandma." I read that one 3 times before the words sank in. I didn't cry, but my chest felt heavy in the best way, like something broken was starting to heal. But of course, it wasn't all warm and fuzzy. 2 days later, I got a new email from Mom. No subject line. Just all caps. How dare you betray us to the family? I didn't raise you to be this cruel. I hope you're happy destroying everything. It's over between us. No apology. No reflection. Just rage. That was when I knew there was no going back. She didn't want to make things right. She wanted to maintain control, and now that she couldn't, she wanted to punish me for leaving. But she wasn't done yet. A few days after that, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was Bella. Hey, she said flatly. I just wanted you to know you completely ruined Mom's credit. What? She put the rent on her credit card after you left. She thought you'd come crawling back, but now she can't pay it off. We're probably getting kicked out next week. I stayed silent. You happy? She asked. Bella, I said slowly, do you remember what Mom said to me on Christmas? She didn't mean it. Did you mean it when you called me selfish? When you said I chose to help? She didn't answer. I'm not doing this with you, I said. I'm done being blamed for choices you both made. She huffed. Whatever. Just know if we end up homeless, it's your fault. And then she hung up. But this time, the guilt didn't stick. I didn't pace the floor. I didn't replay the conversation 100 times in my head. I just turned my phone off, made a cup of tea, and sat on my tiny balcony while the winter wind rolled through the trees. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's backup plan. I felt like a person. And yet, this isn't where the story ends. Because a week later, I got a knock at my apartment door. And when I opened it, there stood Bella. No warning. No call. Just a suitcase by her side and tears in her eyes. I stood in the doorway, staring at Bella like I was looking at a ghost. She hadn't told me she was coming. She didn't even text. Just showed up with a suitcase and the same look she always wore when she wanted something, only this time, there was something else under it. Desperation. Panic. Maybe. But I wasn't moved. What are you doing here? I asked, flat. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve, the tears smudging her eyeliner. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't say anything. I tried staying with a friend, but it didn't work out. Mom's in the hospital. Stress or something. They're saying we have to be out by Monday, and the landlord already changed the locks. I don't have anywhere else. There it was, the sob story. The unspoken expectation. That I'd sigh, roll my eyes, let her in, and once again shoulder the burden for a family that never even thanked me. But this time, something had shifted. Something had broken free inside me, and there was no putting it back. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it, but not the way she wanted me to. But I'm not the solution anymore. Her mouth opened. Closed. Liam, come on. It's just for a little bit. I'll get a job. I'll figure it out. I swear. Just help me get back on my feet. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Bella had never once paid me back for anything. Not the times I covered her tuition shortfall. Not the phone bills. Not the gas money. She'd called me selfish while sitting in clothes I bought her. She'd laughed when Mom said I was a burden. And now, when her world was crumbling, she wanted me to hit pause on my own peace to pull her out? I already gave you years of my life, I said. You used me. Mom used me. And none of you saw me as anything more than a paycheck. But I'm your sister, she said, like that meant something. Yeah, I replied. And that used to mean something to me, too. But you let Mom treat me like garbage, and you joined in. You never stood up for me. You never even said thank you. She blinked fast, trying to keep from crying harder. I didn't know what to do, Mom always, she told me. I shook my head. You're an adult, Bella. Just like me. And I figured it out. You can too. There was a long pause. The cold wind rushed in through the open doorway, making her shiver. So that's it, she whispered. I nodded once. That's it. I shut the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't scream. I just closed it gently, locked it, and walked back into my apartment. My apartment. The quiet wrapped around me like a blanket. I stood in the middle of the room for a while, not moving, not thinking. Then I walked over to the kettle, made a cup of tea, and sat down on the couch. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for putting myself first. That night, I slept better than I had in years. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Bella moved in with a friend from high school and got a job at a diner downtown. Mom recovered, but she had to move back in with her own mother. I didn't respond to their messages. I didn't write back. I kept the boundary clean and firm. I didn't cut them off out of hate. I cut them off out of love for myself. Because the truth is, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to people who hurt you is nothing at all. And sometimes the only way to heal is to walk away and never look back. I'm not a villain. I'm just finally free.